When you're ready, Chairman. We are now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Sorry, I've lost vision for a second there. Should be back hopefully in just a second. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual Cabinet meeting for the 30th of September 2020. I am the Chair, Councillor Paul Arnott, and I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting by whatever means. Please turn off any telephone devices or set them to silent. As the Cabinet meeting is dependent on an internet connection, we may lose you and we may lose the meeting, but please bear with us and we'll try to reconnect. If after 15 minutes we can't do so, we'll have to consider the meeting adjourned. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. And I'd be grateful if you could please keep points as short as you can and don't repeat points that have already been made. And do not, in the style of Donald Trump, interrupt. Thank you. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. And Debbie, I know, will be monitoring those. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting, and any members of the public who want to view it can do so by visiting the website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you're present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Councillor Haywood.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Young.
Present.
Councillor Loudon.
Present.
Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Rickson.
Present.
Councillor Rowland.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. All present and correct.
Thank you very much, Sue. So we go to agenda item 1, which is public speaking. We have 3 members of the public registered to speak this evening. Mr. Gent wishes to speak at item 14 on towards zero carbon development in the West End, and I'll invite you, Mr. Gent, to speak at that time. Mr. Ed Dolphin wishes to speak at item 15 on nature recovery networks and rewilding projects. And again, Mr. Dolphin, I'll invite you to speak at an appropriate moment. We have Sophie Martin, who also has a question to put, and I'd be very delighted to ask her to speak now, please. Debbie, is Miss Martin present?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right,
Go ahead,
I think I unmuted myself there.
Okay.
Right, so sorry, I'll start again. What I said was, thank you, Chairman, for the introduction. And I'm a resident of Exmouth, and therefore the question that I have for the councillors today is that I presume you're all in receipt of my question, and therefore I will start with the significance of an S59 warning notice. And that once issued, the clearly defined actions that can be implemented and serve as a punishment and therefore deterrent if that warning notice should be breached within a 12-month period. I.e. the same drivers and vehicles are in the same place doing the same thing every day and night. So I expect there's a high likelihood of that happening in this case. But it includes, although it is not limited to, the driver being ordered to stop driving the vehicle, the subsequent seizure of that vehicle and possible destruction, but the certainty of prosecution. And the drivers in question who cause such misery to the residents of Exmouth easily fall into the category of careless and inconsiderate driving and using their vehicle antisocially, which is likely to cause harm alarm, rather, distress and annoyance to members of the public. And therefore, my second point being that given the number of S59 warning notices that may have been issued in the last financial year, what have EDC done to ensure they are effective and not rendered redundant by a lack of follow-up enforcement? One can only presume that they're not enforced that stringently because, as I say, the behaviour continues unabated every day and night here. And my final point being that after the installation of the CCTV, which I believe was put in for a fortnight over the summer, which subsequently followed that incident at Walkham Point, but the issue concerning the most concern for Exmouth residents is the individuals who use the seafront and surrounding roads as their personal 24-hour racing track, it would seem. And therefore, I think the CCTV has been set up in the wrong place because I can pinpoint exactly where they gather every night and rev their engines and do their worst. Having read a few articles by Exmouth Journal and also featured on Devon Live, in 2008, I believe there was a suggestion to close Queen's Drive during the night, but that was voted down, and I'm not entirely sure why. So if the councillors could possibly let me know why that decision was taken, because I would happily be charged with the barrier control if that's what the sticking point is. And then finally, just to say, EDDC, you know, Exmouth is a wonderful destination. I'm a Londoner. I've only been here for 2 years, but I love it here. It's a destination seaside holiday town. It should be, at least, with a bright, modern, financially sound future. Michael Keynes is moving in shortly. Mitch Tonks is already here. £1 million houses seem to go up with alarming alacrity, which is a source of great amusement to quite a few people here. But it's a potential future Olympic destination as well, with the world champion bridge family in residence and their kite surfing school soon to open. But I don't know whether that's conducive with this maniacal obsession with the chosen few.
3 minutes, Chair.
Who, you know, insist on this environmentally damaging behaviour, but it's also physiologically and mentally harmful, to continue. It seems to me they hold the law in contempt.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Can you move to your sort of concluding?
Yeah, the conclusion is, if there's no solution to the problem, and the behaviour will therefore continue to go unchallenged in any meaningful sense, can you please let me know? Because if Exmouth's going to have its natural beauty and tranquility, you know, transgressed and debased in this way, I will consider moving.
Okay, right. Thank you very much for that question. I hope you appreciate there's a way in which we duck it completely and say that this is a matter for the police, but that isn't satisfactory. So what we need to do is ask, we don't have a specific officer here tonight who has covered that area, but I'm wondering if I can just ask, I think what we need to do is give you a written answer really to this question.
Okay.
Can I just ask our CEO, Mark Williams, if there's any specific information you could provide now to Ms. Martin? Other than that, perhaps, you know, both your contribution and mine can lead towards us writing back to her. Mark.
No. I mean, there is quite a history to this in terms of the involvement of the council, the police, the community safety partnership, and others in trying to resolve this issue. So it's probably fairer, I think, if we prepare a letter explaining the full background to the questioner.
Chairman,
Okay.
may I speak?
Yes, please do,
Please?
Councillor Ragg.
Yeah. Well, that was within the whole of the seafront was within my county division when I was a Devon County councillor from 2005 to 2017, and the problem was intermittent but ongoing, with different generations coming along. It was agreed to close Foxholes car park, but it was deemed inappropriate by the county council, or not possible to put a barrier across the road at the Walkham Point end. In fact, the police were very active on this, and they actually stopped about 5,000 racers coming here from elsewhere in the country. They stopped them the motorway service station in Exeter. So it's something that certainly there was the Foxholes Residents Association many years ago. I've been a councillor for 24 years, more than that. And the problem has been ongoing virtually from the time that I became a town councillor, district councillor, county councillor. There was a working group that was set up, and that was chaired by Honorary Alderman Ron Mudge, who was the Lyttelham district and town councillor. But the problem, it comes in spurts, it comes and goes. It's young people. It's in the hands of either the Highways Authority, who can actually ban traffic perhaps, but it was deemed not appropriate at the time. But mainly it's a police matter, and it's for the police. They've got automatic number recognition cameras, and it is within their gift to do something. So I think that maybe it's one Councillor Gazzard might raise this with the local action group, where they have there are regular meetings between the police and the town council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wragg, for the perspective from Exmouth. Can I invite Councillor Tom Wright to speak next, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's following on from what Councillor Wragg said. I used to sit on the local advisory group, the police group, which is sort of Dave Whelan, our community support officer, community safety officer, attends that regularly, but there's been a lack of interest and people haven't been turning up recently. What I would say is that this is an issue which is discussed at every one of those local action group meetings, but the answer does lie with the police and policing. The problem is, although they make a noise, they are not necessarily speeding, but they are being very inconsiderate. And in the old days, using a vehicle inconsiderately, such as sitting down, revving it unnecessarily, was an offence. But I'm afraid, I'm ashamed of my former colleagues that they seem to turn a blind eye to such transgressions currently. But it is a situation which the residents of Exmouth and Exmouth Police are very well aware of, and I suggest that we actually, the Chief Executive asks Dave Whelan, our community safety officer, to raise this again with the local police commander.
I think that's a very helpful suggestion, Councillor Wright, there as well, about Dave Whelan. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out, I don't think it's a situation that's particularly just confined to Exmouth. I think it's happening elsewhere in East Devon. And as I'm also a police volunteer, what I would also try and encourage members of the public to do is, if they see this happening, is to try and take a note of the registration number and report any antisocial behaviour driving through to the police, because the more times that is reported through to them, the more likely they are to take action, which can actually result in extreme circumstances of the actual vehicle being impounded. So I would encourage members of the public to try and take that action, as well as the other suggestions that have also been made.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Rowland. I saw briefly a blue hand from Councillor Gazzard, but I've lost it. Steve, did you wish to speak at this point?
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to confirm what Councillor Wragg and Councillor Wright had to say. It has been brought up many times at the local action group in Exmouth. There have been operations down there to stop drivers. Some have been given notices and some have actually been fined. But I would suggest that if yourself and the Chief Executive are going to write back to the lady concerned, could you also copy in, as Tom said, Antonia Weeks, the inspector at Exmouth, because as Tom has rightly said, we've raised it time and time again. And there was a meeting today of the action group, but there hasn't been one obviously since March because of the COVID lockdown. So but I think that would be helpful if you could copy in the inspector as well, please.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And can we note that for the minutes, please? Thank you very much to Ms. Martin for her question and to all the contributors thereafter. We'll move on now to agenda item 2, which is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on that set of minutes from 21st of July 2020, please could you raise your blue hand? But if no blue hands have been raised, I will take this as an indication that you all agree the minutes of that meeting. How are we doing, Debbie? I can't see any hands at the moment.
There aren't any blue hands, Chair.
Sue, thank you, Sue, very much. Okay, in which case the minutes of that previous meeting have been agreed. Agenda item 4 is to receive apologies. And at the moment, I'm aware that we have Councillor Dan Ledger from the Cabinet who has apologised. Anybody else that we're aware of, Sue or Debbie?
Not as I'm aware of, Chair.
No, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 4 will now be a roll call to for us to declare any interests in any of the matters on the agenda today, which will be done by Debbie.
Okay, we'll start with you then, Chairman, please. Councillor Arnott.
No interests.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
No interest, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
No interests.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
No interest.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please.
No interests, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rickson.
None, thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Rowland, please.
No, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. I've got a blue hand from Councillor Moulding here. Councillor Moulding, I'm sorry if I missed you earlier. Can I ask you to make a comment if you wish?
Merely, Chairman, to declare my interest if I wish to speak on the minutes of the overview committee at a later part of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. We'll take them there. Thank you for mentioning that now. Agenda item 5 is to notify you about late items that have come onto the agenda. So you'll see that those are numbers 24, 25 and 26. With your indulgence, I'm going to move 24, the minutes of the overview committee, and 26, the minutes of the Housing Review Board, up the agenda to after item 11. Because essentially they are also the approval of minutes, so it makes sense to get rid of them, to deal with them at that early stage in the meeting. So thank you for that. Those are the late items. Agenda item 6 is concerned with confidential or exempt items, and I'm advised there are no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. And therefore we move on to item 7, which is the forward plan. Would any non-members of Cabinet like to speak on that? If so, do please raise a blue hand. Okay, in which case, Cabinet, would anybody like to make any comments on the forward plan at this stage? That's also a no, in which case thank you for that. So that is agreed and noted. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is for us to take the minutes of scrutiny committee held on the 21st of May 2020. Again, any non-members of Cabinet wish to make a comment on those? No, thank you very much. Cabinet, are those minutes acceptable to you as well? If you have a comment, please raise a blue hand. Okay, in which case those minutes are also accepted and agreed. And we go on now to item 9, the minutes of the Community Grant Panel held on the 1st of September 2020. Again, I think I've got Councillor Tom Wright on this item. So Tom, please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I suspect Alan Dent would have wanted to speak as well. We are very pleased to report that the bid by the group to buy the fire station for community use, for community use for males and females to provide social contact was successful, and we're looking very much forward to that being a great asset to the community of Budleigh Salterton. And I think on behalf of all those who are engaged in raising the money, I'd like to pass on my thanks as a district councillor to the district council for supporting it.
Seconded.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Alan, coming in there from, I don't know, a prairie somewhere or wherever you are. And Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to echo what was just said. As I chaired that community grant panel meeting, I was very impressed with the 2 requests that we received, and I'm really pleased to subsequently hear that the Budleigh Salterton community group was successful in securing the fire station, as I understand it. So that was great news, and I'd like to wish them every success in their future plans to get the workshop up and running, and also to the Coleridge Memorial Statue group in Ottery St Mary.
There is one slight disappointment. The fireman's pole has been removed, so the ladies who were going to knit upstairs won't have the pleasure of sliding down the fireman's pole, but I'm certain they'll find another way to exit their meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright, for see, no lessons learned there comment. Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Alan and Jack, for your contributions on that. And the District Council was, of course, very pleased to contribute to both the Budleigh calls and to the Coleridge statue in Ottery. May I take it, therefore, that from Cabinet itself that we are happy to accept those minutes? No blue hands, then those are agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to look at the minutes for Strata Joint Committee, Joint Scrutiny Committee held on the 8th of May 2020. Now that's wrong, it's the 8th of September, isn't it? I think, yes. So the 8th of September 2020. Would any non-cabinet members like to make any comment on those? I see no hands. Thank you very much, Cabinet. Any comments on the scrutiny minutes from the 8th of September? Strata scrutiny, I should say. Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Yeah, only to say that there are some spelling and grammatical errors which make it the minutes a little bit unreadable in the supplementary question and answer section of the minutes. So perhaps that can be passed on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. If you can, yes, if you can just email those across to the relevant person, that would be much appreciated. I think those are done by Timbridge, aren't they? I think they produce those minutes. So thank you very much for that. Cabinet, other than that, are we happy to agree those minutes? We are, thank you very much indeed. Now moving on to item 11, the minutes of the budget setting and capital allocation panel, which was held quite recently on the 16th of September 2020. Can I ask for our finance lead, Mr. Simon Davey, to speak to that briefly?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that these minutes link to item 16 on your agenda, the finance plan. The panel debated the finance plan and considered the areas to bring forward in the budget setting process to help us address the projected budget gap, which is identified in the plan, and I'll discuss when we get to that item on the agenda. But I thought it was just raising now Cabinet's acknowledgement of those minutes in that there are 2 recommendations being made to Cabinet from the panel. The first, that the debate of the panel is taken into account in considering the financial plan. In fact, item 16 on your agenda, the financial plan, does ask Cabinet to endorse or otherwise the steer being given by the panel in looking at the projected budget gap. And the second recommendation is to set up a task and finish forum to consider how commercialisation can help us address that budget gap. So I thought it was just raising that at this point so members can have that in mind when we get to item 16 as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Davey. Very helpful comment there. Any non-members of Cabinet wish to speak in relation to that at this stage? Obviously, we'll talk, I'm sure, about financial strategy much more later at item 16. Don't see anybody there. Thank you, Cabinet. Are you happy to note and agree those minutes of the budget session capital allocation panel? Mr. Gordon-Lennox.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. So can I just ask, in terms of setting up the TAF, whether you're going to take that decision now or whether you're going to defer discussion on that to the item 16? Only that if you are going to take the decision now, could I ask that in setting it up, you agree to it being on a political basis, political balance basis, but in the event I cannot get nominations from all of the groups, that the seats are then reapportioned among those groups that do wish for seats? Thank you.
Okay.
You can either decide that now or later.
Okay, well, always, why put off today what you put off until tomorrow, what you could do today? Yes, a blue hand from Councillor Miller. I thought there might be. Paul.
Oh, well, I need to ask, Chair, Leader, about the size of the TAF, which isn't mentioned in this. I think part of the problem with getting members from, or part of the issues surrounding members of different political groups are how large the TAF will be. And depending on how large it is will obviously affect how many, or if any, members of the smaller groups can actually be on the TAF. So I don't know whether we're delegating authority to Henry to decide how large it will be, or whether Cabinet has views, Jack in particular, who's seen put his hand up, on how large that TAF should be.
Okay, Councillor Rowland, please.
Thank you, Leader. As I chaired that meeting, I'm very keen to see that task and finish group set up for this particular subject. And I'd suggest that the makeup of the TAF could be 15 councillors, which would give scope for representation from across the whole 60 councillors there.
Okay, yes, let's come to Councillor Mike Allen, please, now.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Simon Davey to explain the paragraph at the bottom of page 34 of the agenda?
Okay, let's all, right, there we go. That's about the medium-term financial plan. I'll give Simon 30 seconds to find that paragraph and then invite him to speak. Simon, are you happy to answer this question from Councillor Allen?
Yes, if I can, Chair. So I'm at Councillor Allen, I'm at the bottom of page 34. What's the reference you wish explaining?
Sorry.
So, Mike, it's a bit
about the medium-term financial plan. It talks about known demand changes, but not growth in services or staffing. And it talks about a commitment to the carbon reduction programme. And it then says, although significant, will not meet the requirements alone. External funding will be required, or reduction services to meet the requirement fully. And I just didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me.
Okay, I can cover that off when we actually deal with the main plan, but just to answer that specific point, what I'm highlighting in terms of the figures included in the medium-term financial plan, I've included an annual sum of 323,000 going forward in the plan every year for carbon reduction action plan. The actual carbon reduction plan, when costed up, and it's an ongoing calculation that changes, was millions of pounds. Now that 323,000 can help us borrow, can help us do a lot of things, but for the authority on its own and using its own resources, it will never be able to afford to meet the whole carbon reduction plan as it sits, unless we can get external funding from government or we can attract private sector funding. But I think that's recognised, and the carbon reduction programme and action plan that we're working on is something that will continue to be looked at in terms of trying to fund. But it's just making that point in the medium-term financial plan, the full programme costs aren't included, only 323,000 a year is included.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Councillor Jeff Pook, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the previous topic, which was the task and finish forum on commercialisation and specifically the transfer of assets. Since I proposed this at that meeting, I think it's very important that it gets a good wide airing through councillors, because it has so much impact on all the individual councils. And so I'd support Councillor Rowland's proposal that it's as wide as possible and certainly politically balanced. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. In which case, no other blue hands outside Cabinet. Can I come back into Cabinet with this then? So you'll note at the end of page 35, as Henry helpfully pointed out, we have two recommendations here that we need to agree today. The first is that the debate by the Budget Setting and Capital Allocations panel on the draft financial strategy 2021 to 31 is taken into account prior to the strategy being presented to Council. And I think we can agree that. And then secondly, which is this issue that a task and finish forum be set up on the topic of commercialisation to include specifically the issue of asset transfer to town and parish councils. I'm reading that out just in case people aren't, members of the public haven't got their agendas. Mr. Gordon-Lennox, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that the Constitution says that there would normally be 7 members in a TAF, but we do have ones which are larger than that. 15 would be quite large, though, in terms of trying to get sufficient members from a cross-party basis. So I don't know whether it would be rude of me to suggest that maybe 10 might be a better number. But if you want to go for 15, then that, of course, is for you to decide.
Okay, Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Thank you. I agree with Henry. 10 is also quite a neat number, as Henry has said before, and he's nodding because it's easy to balance it politically, and it means that all the groups on the council, should they want to take up the opportunity of being on the TAF, are able to be on there. So I think we should go with 10, although Jack is going to be chairing it, so I don't really want to be overruling him as he's actually chairing it. So maybe Jack can, if he agrees, I think 10 would be good.
Okay, so we've got a nice little debate going, 10 or 15. Councillor Paul Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not minded either way. Often I prefer a wider range. However, 10 seems to work with other panels. I suppose my question on this is both to Councillor Rowland and also to Tim Childs, is just to make sure that this council, which has got a tremendous amount of work to do, there's catching up to do, there's all sorts of challenges facing us with national issues and pandemics, that this proposed task and finish forum recommercialisation, as written here, to specifically cover the issue of asset transfer to town and parish councils, that it doesn't clash and conflict. Some overlap is fine, but it doesn't conflict with the work of the Asset Management Forum, which Mr. Childs and myself are sort of bringing back into the fore, really, after a period of abeyance. And that's my only concern, is that two different things are set up which might end up working at odds with one another. As long as there's overlap and it can be arranged so that they're conducive to one another, that's absolutely fine. In fact, that's to be welcomed. But if you have two committees with different memberships talking at cross purposes, it's simply wasting all councillors' time. And I suppose just some cooperation and synergy between the portfolio holders, between the officers, to make sure that both are driving in the right direction and not competing with one another, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Leader. While I'm going to come to Jack, can you just think whether there might be some tiny wording we might be able to include in this, Paul, before we actually note and agree this? Sorry,
well,
Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, perhaps, and again, Henry is the sort of the go-to person with wording, but you know, where it says to include specifically the issue of asset transfer to town and parish councils, comma, in conjunction with the work of or in conjunction with the Asset Management Forum, so that the two are joined at the hip, and then Councillor Rowland and myself and the officers can work out how the two dovetail together. It shouldn't be too difficult. Commercialism isn't just about asset transfers. You know, it's a very wide topic, and I'm sure councillors from across all parties will want to be involved. But Councillor Pook, I know, did a great deal of work previously on the community asset transfer policy. He sat on the asset management, I believe he chaired the Asset Management Forum, and I've read the minutes of those. And there are lots of things that we can bring back into the mix. But I think perhaps a bit of wording there just to clarify that it works in conjunction with rather than in competition with, because that would just be crazy. It would waste too much time. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just, before I come to Councillor Rowland, can I just go back to Mr. Gordon-Lennox? Henry, if we added that put a comma after parish councils, that's doable, isn't it? I don't think that creates any difficulties, does it?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, the only thing I would say is that necessarily both would be reporting to Cabinet anyway. So ultimately, Cabinet will be the owner. So I think de facto that would happen, but I don't think there's any problem adding the wording.
Okay, thank you. Before I come to Councillor Rowland, I'll come back to Councillor Jeff Pook, please.
Thank you. I just want to say the differentiation between the Asset Management Forum and this proposed TAF is the Asset Management Forum has been working to try and getting all the data together into a manageable state so we could actually make proper informed decisions. And the Asset Management Forum's now got this information together. Now it's a matter of using that information to identify how we can best transfer things for the benefits of the communities and the council. So it's like one was providing the information, and this is going to be the body, a wider council body, which looks at the implications and the opportunities.
Okay, thank you for that, Jeff. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to endorse what Councillor Haywood said, that I envisaged that we would be working closely in cooperation on this, because he's absolutely right that it'd be silly for two groups to be going off on totally different tangents on this subject. So it's essential that we work together. And I envisage that happening because of our good working relationships anyway. I'm quite relaxed about whether it's 15 or 10, provided it's sufficient number that we get a political balance within that group to represent the council. So I'm quite happy to accept 10 if that works. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I think all the work that Mr. Gordon-Lennox and Councillor Miller have been doing on these various bodies does show that 10 works. But can I just put that therefore back to Cabinet as a general view? If we were to say that this is a 10-member task and finish forum, would you all be happy with that? And please do blue hand if you're not.
Certainly am, Chair.
Okay. So I think let's have that, and then if we're happy with the addition of just an extra clause afterwards, and the wording escapes me. Paul, can you remember what it was that you were saying?
If it's agreeable to the panel, sorry, I'll defer to Henry.
Well, I just wrote down in conjunction with the AMF.
Right, that's a good amendment. Okay, in which case, so Henry, since we're amending a recommendation to Cabinet that's come, do we need to vote on that? Do we now to make sure that's
No, I think I mean, there seems to be consensus on it, but I think if you can do what you've done before, which is to sort of get affirmation by asking if everybody's in agreement or not,
Okay.
by show of blue hands, please.
Okay, can we have blue hands for Cabinet to agree, please? Okay, also I'll take mine down too soon. So that's there, yeah. You're on mute, Henry.
Yes, that's agreed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, just to say for members of the public who can't see these blue hands, sorry about that, but that was a unanimous vote of the Cabinet, just to make that clear. So we're now going to, if you remember, just indulge me for a moment. There were 2 parish notices I was going to give earlier, and I'm going to thank you for something you've all done. I was going to ask you at the beginning of the meeting to, if you wanted to call me anything, to call me chair rather than chairman. And this is just something, most of you do it in any case, but I'm very grateful that you're doing it tonight. It's very important for a lot of reasons that I'm sure we'll discuss at another time, but thank you for that. And the other parish notice, which I've emailed you all about, but maybe you haven't all seen, is that in the unlikely event that we go beyond 2 hours, at 2 hours, we will have a comfort break. So just in case, any of you are in trouble, there is mercy out there. So we're going to bring now those 2 other minute items up to this. So item 24, the minutes of the Overview Committee, and item 26, the minutes of the Housing Review Board. So can we look at the minutes of Overview, please? From memory, I think Councillor Moulding wanted to speak to those, but I'm not sure if you're doing a blue hand there, Andrew. Or perhaps
yes, not. I am, Chairman. Sorry, I didn't realise I'd have to put a blue hand up.
No, got that. Thank you for that.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please do.
I've spoken on this in the past, but I wanted to speak again, and I have declared an interest because I'm patron of ARC in Axminster, which looks after the well-being of people suffering from bereavement, trauma, and mental health. And they work closely with the medical practice in Axminster. The medical practice in Axminster has 12,000 patients on its list. And over the 11 or 12 years that ARC has been operating, they have dealt with mental health issues for over 2,000 of the 12,000 patients. That's 1 in 6. Now, the debate that took place on this at Overview looked at the possibility of the District Council appointing a mental health officer to look after the interests of the residents of East Devon, but particularly for the staff and the council members that represent East Devon. Now, staff, I guess, what are there now? 200 staff, maybe? And how many councillors? 60? So that's 260. Even if we say only 240, if you take a sixth of 240, my guess is that 40 of staff and council members have at some time or will in the future suffer from mental health problems. And that is why I am particularly keen that those members of staff and members of the council are supported by a mental health officer. And I hope that this council takes a decision to appoint a mental health officer. The Housing Review Board have done that on behalf of the tenants of East Devon. Maybe there could be a sharing of roles there. I know they're funded from 2 different sources, but we've done it before. There could be a funding pot that goes towards that post from one area and another funding pot from another area. All I'm wanting to do is to ensure that mental health is at the prime factor of East Devon District Council, particularly for its officers and members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Well, thank you, Andrew. That means a lot. Thank you very much.
I always thought a chair was an inanimate object.
Well,
Make
now you see, I think this is interesting because it actually means to man the chair, and that comes from French "man" for handle, and that's what it really used to
Man
mean.
the chair means chairman.
It will, and that's correct. So, as a literary fellow, I don't disagree with that. However, it has acquired a completely different meaning, and we end up, don't we, calling people Madam, Lady Alderman, Mrs. Chairman, and all this kind of stuff. So it's good. But thank you. Let's chair it is.
Can I just
Yes.
add, should the chair always be well padded?
Thank you. I'm doing my best not to, as it happens at the moment. So on one of the reasons these 2 minutes I brought them forward is that, as Councillor Moulding has suggested, there is the possibility, which we have discussed, about asking officers to scope how or if these two roles may in some way overlap or be performed by the same officer or the same department or whatever. And as Councillor Moulding quite rightly pointed out, the next set of minutes for the Housing Review Board will be asked to agree to find a specialist mental health support officer. And of course, in these minutes, there's something being asked along a very similar line. So I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute, but it makes a lot of sense. Can I come to Mr. Williams, Mark Williams, our CEO first? I see his hand is there.
So just primarily a point of information, there are 500 staff, not 200.
Yes.
But I didn't actually read the overview minutes as suggesting that it would be exclusively for staff and members of the council.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mark. Can I come to Councillor Steve Gazzard, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing these minutes to come forward tonight. Following on from what Councillor Moulding had to say, and I fully endorse everything that Councillor Moulding had to say, there was a very in-depth discussion at overview regarding this, because I think every one of us knows that the situation out there regarding mental illness is getting worse. We as councillors are getting more and more casework that we are trying to get through, and I thought that scrutiny agreed that it would be for members of the public as well. So I stand to be corrected. I heard what Mark just had to say, but I stand to be corrected if I misunderstood that. But I do think we definitely do need somebody to look after our staff, look after councillors, and also to look after the members of public. Yes, there are other agencies outside there, but they are snowed under with work. And I think we have in my view, we have a duty of care for the public, and we should have a separate officer for what we're looking at for our staff, councillors, and for general public. And it was quoted in the discussion that obviously there would be a cost implication to this, and yes, there would be, because we would have to find the right person to do the job. And at the end of the day, I think that we can find the money. I did suggest that we take it from reserves. And to me, at the end of the day, lives are more important than money. So I think we need to look at it that we're trying to help and prevent a lot of sad things that have happened over the last 6 months, and try to make things a lot easier over the next 6 months or however long it's going to be. So I would be very supportive, and I hope Cabinet would be, to looking into appointing an officer for this. And I fully support the next topic, and I won't speak on that in relationship to the Housing Review Board, because I think that our tenants out there are really finding things difficult at the moment, and would love to have a mental health officer to speak to. So I think there's two separate roles, and I think that we need two people to do it. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve, for that. We've got 3 more speakers. If, despite this is a crucial topic, but if possible, if you can not repeat points already been made, I'll be very grateful for that. Just in timeliness tonight. Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. What overview we're pondering at the heart of it was whether to sign up to the local authority mental health challenge. And that's something I think we need to Cabinet tonight to commit to looking into this and contacting the coordinators of the local authority mental health challenge. Because reading the declaration carefully, which I urge everybody to do, because there seems to be some confusion arising, I don't think there would be significant cost implication, because it commits the council not to recruit a dedicated mental health officer from outside, a completely new position, with that as their only job specification. It seeks to make somebody who is suitably qualified within the organisation a lead officer for mental health. There's nothing in the local authority mental health challenge which refers to appointing a completely new role. So there are 44 middle tier authorities who have signed up to this declaration. I'm suggesting we can surely ask a few of those about the value these lead officers for mental health bring to their councils. I'd like to think that following these inquiries, we can agree to sign this mental health challenge declaration. I mean, even if it saves or enhances one life, I think it's a really important thing for us to do.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you very much, Leader, and good evening to everybody. Declarations of interest. Minute 54. I'm a Devon County Councillor. I'm the Vice Chairman of ARC, the mental health charity in Axminster. I'm Chairman of Cloakham Lawn Sports Centre, which provides health and well-being through education through sport, and also I'm a mental health champion of Devon County Council. When we're actually looking at this subject, I passionately believe that we need to look at solutions, what we as East Devon District Council can do. When I look through the recommendations again today, especially on point 6, that Cabinet request to consider appointing a lead officer for mental health in the organisation in conjunction with the request for a mental health officer from the Housing Review Service, which obviously would be paid through the Housing Revenue account. And that Cabinet agrees to appoint a member champion for mental health. I absolutely endorse that approach. I'm sure that we would all say that mental health is one of the biggest challenges what we're going to be undertaking at the start of the pandemic to where we are now and actually coming out of the pandemic, because these sort of subjects I know can actually cause trauma. We know that families are having incredibly stressful times at the moment with so much uncertainty, alone with the pandemic, with jobs, with going back to schools, with everyone being huddled up to a continuous time of Christmas that everyone's under the same roof, unable to breathe at times, and we can see things ramping up in our communities. So the people of East Devon need as much support as they can. I'm sure that all the 60 would endorse that we need to take some sort of an action to it. When we're looking at resourcing, we know our present financial situation, but it is a case that can we afford not to? I will also ask for permission for you, Leader, to speak on the housing HRB minutes later.
Yeah.
When we're actually looking at the 500 employees we actually have at the district, we need to have those officers on top form. We need to ensure they're getting the right support at the right time. We also need to make sure that we as the 60 members are able to get support. We are making big decisions on behalf of the residents of East Devon. So really, Leader, I'm not going to take any more of your time on this, but I really, really would urge Cabinet to really examine this, because the Cabinet and us as a council have really made a very positive step with the climate emergency. We have gone out there, we've tendering, advertising for an officer to do this on behalf of East Devon residents, and I'm sure all the residents of East Devon would absolutely endorse this approach, because this is a real and present threat to every single individual and their families at this time of great need. And if nothing else, Leader, can we actually look at this at least as a pilot so we can measure this over a period of time?
Thank you very much, Councillor Hall. Councillor Paul Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very, very brief. I'm delighted that this subject has come up for debate and is being talked about. I am mindful, however, that in the recent history of this council, members of this council have been reduced to tears by the words of other councillors. Bullying and harassment and intimidation has been a feature. I'm pleased to see I haven't seen it in the last year, but I certainly witnessed it as a member of the public. And it's really just to clarify and confirm that councillors are humans. We're human beings. We have feelings too. And councillors, when they speak in debates, regardless of whatever political party they represent, whatever rosette, whatever their views, they can still be courteous. Courtesy costs nothing. Politeness costs nothing. Kindness costs nothing. So I think the saying being is that if you can be anything in this world, be kind. And if you can't be kind, be quiet. And I think that we as members need to understand that the mental health of councillors is just as important as that of staff, of members of the public, of the wider East Devon community, the wider UK population. So I would urge and just beseech all councillors, when you speak in this forum, council, cabinet committees, keep your vitriol and your language to a decent level. You know, respect your fellow councillors, be kind, be polite, and we will get a lot more out of it. We really will, because the mental health of councillors must not be disregarded. We're all humans. We all like to be treated with some courtesy and respect, and that way council will flourish. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hayward. A comment noted. Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you very much. I would just like to have a bit more advice, please, from Mark on external, filling this post externally, and also the overlap between the two mental health officers from a tenant's point of view, and also from an officers and members' point of view. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear very well what you said earlier, but I wondered if you could just comment a bit further, please.
Okay, Mr. Williams, are you happy to just comment on that?
Well, I think it goes to actually, Cabinet's assessment of these recommendations, because I'll be honest, I'm not totally clear on what's being asked for. Is it signing up to the declaration, which some are suggesting has a relatively minimal implication, or is it going much further and actually trying to provide a mental health service, not just for staff and councillors, but also for the wider East Devon public? So if you look at what's happened with the housing service and the recommendation from the Housing Review Board, that was clearly the case that a need had been identified through officers' experience of dealing with residents, tenants, and homeless people and others who encountered the housing service, that they did require expert assistance by having an in-house specialism with regards to mental health to help deal with that particular customer base, if you like. So I think we just need to better understand, or even debate at another time, exactly what it is we want to achieve from this, because there are other services being provided out in the district, as Councillor Moulding and Councillor Hall have alluded to. So is it actually we should really do a gap analysis of where there is insufficient resource within the district if we want to provide a mental health service across the district? Or are we just saying initially we want to look at our own requirements as an organisation? I feel that it's not sufficiently clear, because at the moment I'm just trying to work out, well, what sort of budget will I be suggesting to Cabinet that you should be thinking about? And the range at the moment is quite broad, if I'm honest.
Okay, thank you, Mark. The reason I wanted to bring, normally in the normal council cycle, these minutes of overview, which were only from 6 days ago, would have been held over, in fact, for another month. So I was very keen to get them on today so that we could get this particular ball rolling. And I'm very appreciative of what Mark has said, because I do think that's the direction we need to go in. We can start a process now, but we can't appoint somebody tomorrow. But having had the discussion today, I think we can start to ask officers to help us understand what we might be able to do. Councillor Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I'm coming in from my perspective at an opportune moment after the Chief Executive just spoken. And I very much concur with his uncertainty, if you like, as to what it is precisely is being asked for. Whilst I support in principle everything that people have talked about, it is true that what we would need or be able to provide, perhaps by way of support for tenants, would be different perhaps to what we need and should provide for staff, say, and or councillors. And I think, Chair, I'd like to go back to something you said right at the very beginning when you introduced this item, and that is, I think we should be asking the Chief Executive to go away and to try and work up a number of different scenarios and to look at then the costing, the timing, how they might be introduced in the organisation, whether it sits neatly in one silo, whether it's something that can go across several parts of the organisation. And if he's doing that, then we might as well look at, I would suggest also, the suggestion that we also provide some form of support around the second half of the recommendations that are set out on the agenda regarding weight. So that would be my suggestion, Chair, is that we pick up the point you made right at the very beginning, and perhaps we move to conclude this by a vote.
Okay, thank you very much, John. I'm minded to go with that. It's difficult this, we're already an hour in, it's a crucial issue, but it seems as if we do have a potential way forward. Mr. Gordon Lennox, can I come to you and then I'll come to the other speakers in a second.
Thank you, Chair. It was perhaps just to disaggregate number 6 in terms of the recommendations and to point out that there is a paper on the agenda later on about the appointment of member champion for mental health, and that it would be more appropriate for the Cabinet to defer the decision on that until that item is considered. And obviously take a decision now, or at least take a position on the member of staff for mental health. Thank you.
Okay, so the member champions comes up later, absolutely. I thought you were going to help us with a wording for a motion in relation to what John had just said, but I'm sure that'll come. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be very brief because most of the points I was going to mention have already been said. I will say, however, I will echo Councillor Gazzard's comments about the standard of the debate we had last Thursday. It was a very open, frank and brutally honest discussion and debate, and it was one that I felt quite privileged to chair. And I think it is a very important matter, which I hope we can resolve. And I'm also happy to present all the other minutes of overview as well to save time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nick. Councillor Mike Allen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed Megan Armstrong also wanted to talk. As far as I know, anything up to 1/3 of the population is likely to suffer some form of depression through their life. And certainly, I know in Honiton there is a particular prevalence of self-harming that is needing attention. And I think a number of the things need separating out here. First of all, we have a duty of care to staff. That duty of care obviously must include care for their mental health as well as their physical health. And I would expect that over the years, the HR department will have arranged suitable support for people who've been in distress. So I think that obviously needs to continue. Does it need an additional person? I don't know. I certainly think that councillors have mental problems on occasions, as we've seen demonstrated over the years, and it's quite clear to me that it would be helpful to have certain access to mental health counselling through the council. With regard to the general public, obviously we want to help people as much as possible, and certainly it's part of the whole poverty agenda that people are helped through their problems, which definitely include the stress and depression of being unable to afford basic necessities. What I don't know is how much effectiveness we can bring through one person dealing with this. I absolutely understand why it can be done for the the residents of our homes that we have, but are we overlapping significantly with the services offered through independent voluntary sector workers and also through the county council's services? And I think before we enter into this, for the wider general public, it would be extremely helpful if there was at least one person who had some form of understanding of how options for treatment and help in mental health could be provided by the council. The question for me is how cost effectively we can do it without tripping over into areas where there's abundant provision, even if it's very inadequate for the overall level of problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike, very much for that. Councillor Megan Armstrong, please.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yes, I was hoping to, and hopefully I will still speak on the next item as well. But I just wanted to really follow on from what the Chief Executive said about the uncertainty about what's actually being asked for here. And certainly the HRB request was exactly as he said, that it was a need that arose, that has arisen from our housing officers dealing with tenants and homeless people and other people who are in insecure accommodation, needing that kind of help. So it is very specific. I wouldn't be entirely happy about wanting to share that role, because I think they'll have more than enough to do just dealing with our tenants. So, you know, that's one issue. And as Councillor Allen has just said, you know, mental health, as most of us will probably know, is a huge, huge, huge topic. There's no way at all that one person or even two people can cope with dealing with our mental health as members, officers' mental health, and the public's mental health. It's just, to put it bluntly, I think that's a nonsense, actually. I think it's a non-starter. So, you know, we've got to be just really very, very clear about what we're seeking, what we're asking for, and some kind of report on this via the Chief Executive or whoever to work out exactly what is needed. Just another thing that was mentioned, I think, earlier also about the fact that there may be a member of our staff who is currently qualified, I put that in quotes, may be qualified to be able to do this kind of role. Well, I'm not sure that we actually have anybody. I'll be pleasantly surprised if we did, but I'm not sure that we do actually have anybody employed by us who is actually qualified to do that, or who would be able to draw it into their current job description anyway. So there are quite a lot of issues there, and I think we have to be very careful that we don't make it too simplistic and, you know, oh, we'll just get somebody to sort out the mental health and everything will be fine, because it won't be, quite honestly. It just won't be. It's too big, and it needs a lot of work on it. So sorry, I might speak again at the next item, but I guess you might hope that I don't. Thank you very much.
Always very pleased to hear from you, of course. Thank you, Megan. And points are well made. I do think we're going in the direction, as Councillor Loudon said earlier as well. We need, but quite urgently, a further report on this so that we don't accidentally cross-collateralise different issues. And as you quite rightly say, the HRB has identified very clearly a role for somebody for the tenants, and that's a lot of work, so you can see that. So we do need to think of it again. Can I go to Councillor Sarah Jackson and then finally to Councillor Paul Miller?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on, can you hear me okay? Because it doesn't look like it's registering.
Yeah, you could shout a bit louder maybe. It's a bit quiet.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you hear me okay?
Yeah, that now is perfect. That's perfect level.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something raised by Councillor Miller with regards to signing the declaration regarding mental health, and whether or not actually we just needed some provision internally. But I think the feedback that we had at Overview from officers was that they, as Councillor Armstrong said, didn't believe that we had the expertise within house at the present time, which is why the suggestion was made that we ought to be looking at potentially a new role to look at support in both internally and more of a strategic approach externally, which I think already we have strategies for that could be refined. But I think that's why the suggestion was made. Now, whether actually we could review that, maybe we just need to ask ever so nicely if we could do a little bit more investigation. Maybe that wasn't conclusive enough, and maybe we do have those expertise, we just don't realise it at this point in time. That's all I really wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest some wording, Chair, following on from Councillor Loudon, to note and thank the Overview Committee for its work, recommendations, and to ask the Strategic Lead for Housing Health and the Environment, if I've got that right, to prepare a report to the next Cabinet to consider the recommendations, Overview's recommendations, and cost/resourcing implications with a view of whether the Council can sign the local authority mental health declaration. That's what I think would be the best thing to do, because we don't have a report on this. I don't feel we can commit to it.
Thank you very much. Before I come to another speaker, can I ask if there's a seconder for that proposal by Councillor Miller? By the means of shouting out loud. Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor John Lennon, thank you very much. John Loudon, thank you. Okay. And then can I just come back out to Councillor Maddie Chapman as a last speaker, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit worried about this. I've worked with mental health, Alzheimer's, dementia for many years, and it's very distressing. The problem with mental health is there's different types, and it starts out in different ways. And it takes a lot of tests, MRI scans, and all sorts of things to get a true diagnosis. I know at the moment RD&E, the mental health unit, is absolutely busting, because I know the matron there and she is absolutely exhausted at the moment. And whereas I think we can sign up, and I think that someone should be qualified to talk to tenants that have problems, that might have the beginning of dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, grief, any number of the different types of mental health illnesses, to have someone that the staff can go to and say, I've got a problem, and then put them to the professionals, because I don't think we could afford to pay for a professional to cover all the different types of mental health. And I would hate us to get involved in something that would lead to someone getting a wrong diagnosis or perhaps someone saying the wrong thing and pushing them over the edge. So I think I do agree with Megan here. It is so big and so wide. I think you've got to be so careful. And I agree, yes, we should sign up. And the last point, as member development or member champion that I used to be, I used to make a point of speaking to every single councillor in the chamber. So I knew all the councillors, and that's how I got to know Megan, etc. So if any councillor had a problem, I would talk to them, and that is why East Devon got a quality council. We got the plus for the work that we were doing with the councillors. I think the staff is something different. I don't think one person can get to know 60 councillors and all the staff and give them support. But I do think a mental health member to support other councillors like the member development used to, I quite enjoyed it at the time. And I think it was helpful, and I worked with Democratic Services. So if a councillor didn't turn up and everyone said, where's that councillor? Democratic Services can say, well, we know about it, you know. So I just like to wave up my concerns, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Very well made. Yes, it's another reason why we need to look into this in greater depth. Quite clearly, it's a big issue. I see Councillor Ian Hall. Ian, I can give you 30 seconds if there's a very quick point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Armstrong said this is too big. It is big, it's huge. The climate is huge. But the fact of it is, and we're not trained clinicians, but there's a big difference between poor mental health and ensuring that this doesn't become mental illness. There are so many different strategies with so many different ways of communicating with the residents of East Devon, as in, for an example, podcasts, that we can think differently so that we ultimately are able to help the residents of East Devon help themselves, not go down a very dangerous route individually and collectively. Thank you, Leader, for letting me talk for the second time.
Thank you, Ian, very much. Right, so coming back into Cabinet, we've got a suggested recommendation there, or motion. I'm hoping that somebody in Democratic Services may have received that from Councillor Miller and may be able to read it back out to us. Thank you, Henry.
We've got that, Chair. So I just tweaked slightly, but it says that Cabinet notes and thank the Overview Committee for its work and recommendations, and instruct the Strategic Lead for Housing, Health and Environment to prepare a report to be brought to the next Cabinet to discuss, sorry, next Cabinet meeting to discuss the recommendations and cost resourcing implications with a view to signing the local authority mental health declaration.
Okay.
Can I add?
Please do.
Oh, I was just going to add the deferral of the mental health champion to the later item, but I think that's probably covered anyway now by the recommendations just being noted.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Megan, would you like to come back on that, please?
Thank you. I'd just like some clarification. I'm not quite sure what that statement means. Perhaps I'm just being a bit stupid tonight. I just don't understand what we're asking the housing lead to actually do in his report. Could somebody just please explain a bit more, please?
Councillor Miller?
Well, I would imagine, as other district councils who've signed this, it would be to look at what they've done, assess what the local authority mental health challenge consider to be a lead officer for mental health, how much they work in that organisation, and come up with an option. Cabinet doesn't have to accept it, but come up with costings and an option of what we can do to how we could realistically get to a position where we could sign the declaration. That's what I would imagine the report might be able to cover, and I think that's what other councils, that's the approach other councils would have taken.
And
Megan, does that answer it?
No, Chair, thank you. Could I just ask again? So is the housing lead the appropriate officer to do that?
That's one of the questions that can be asked to the coordinators of this challenge. I think that regardless of what happens with this, the next item is separate from that because it's about the housing revenue account. So I think for now, it should be treated separately. And I'm just saying that if an officer can investigate it further, we'll be able to vote in a more informed way at the next cabinet meeting, you know, whether we vote for it or not.
I think there's plainly distinctions here, but there's also plainly an overlap, Megan, and I hope it's helpful that we do get further. It looks like we're about to accept the recommendations and the spirit behind it, and what we need to do is work to identify what we can actually do. And I think, again, as everybody has said, and particularly Maddie Chapman near the end, you know, there are some serious serious unintended consequences of this. So we need to look at that as well. But I think in general we're obviously approaching this positively. So can I ask then? Can we take a vote on that, please, by the means of the blue hands?
Green ticks, Chair, might be it's
blimey.
easier for clear. But
put your blue hands down and put your green ticks up, please.
Green ticks in favour, red cross against. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm the only person who's used a green tick at the moment, apart from Jack. Oh no, how many? Oh no.
Yes, please cast your votes now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Got
7.
8 in favour.
8 in favour.
Okay, and red crosses against?
I can't see any, Chair.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for that. And thank you for everybody who's put so much thought and commented to that. Again, I know I've said this before, I wouldn't normally allow these items to go on so long, but this is a key thing. There's no shortcut on mental health, is there? So if we can now go, please, to look at the minutes of the Housing Review Board for the 17th of September 2020. And we have two recommendations at the end there. The first is that Cabinet note the changes to the structure and approve the need for the recruitment of a specialist mental health support officer to work within the Housing Services team. And two, that Cabinet approve additional funding, grade 6, is designated from the Housing Revenue account. What I'm wondering is if Cabinet is minded to accept it, if we note those minutes now and roll that into this small piece of further work to see if that dovetails with the idea that's coming out of overview. Is that acceptable to everybody? Or would anybody like to make a comment?
Seems very reasonable, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll come to, yeah, okay. If we can not please have any speeches about the virtues of addressing the issue of mental health, because I think that's agreed, but coming to you then, Councillor Ian Hall.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Same subject, but obviously two different pots of finance, because it comes from the Housing Revenue account. This has already been identified from the officers who work on behalf of East Devon District Council with the information what they've come to the Housing Review Board for them to consider. So I understand where you're coming, putting them in the same pot, but they need to be as two singulars on this, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely agreed and implicit in that. Thank you for making that point, Ian. Councillor Megan Armstrong, please.
Oh, thanks, Chair, for letting me speak again. Yes, basically that's what I was going to say. Councillor Hall's beating me to it. Yeah, I'm just a bit anxious that the water is going to get a bit muddied if we're not careful. You know, we've actually got money there from the Housing Revenue account for this mental health worker for tenants, and I just don't want to see the two muddied together, because that just wouldn't work as far as practically and financially. I don't think. Thank you. Okay.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you, Megan. And that point's noted and well taken, and we'll make sure that's in the minutes as well. So at that point, we come effectively to the end of the first part of the meeting.
Sorry, Chair, can we just
sorry,
check
Chair.
that the minutes are all agreed, are they, for the HR from the HRB?
Well, also, forgive me, I've just seen Jess Bailey has put a blue hand up. Can I come to Jess, please?
Yes, sorry, I was just going to say that I would be concerned about holding back on this particular recommendation pending further work. So kind of reiterating what Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Hall have said.
Okay, so we agree these recommendations at this point as they are, Jess. Okay, thank you very much. And that's what Henry's saying as well. Thank you. So Cabinet, are we happy to agree those? Green ticks for a yes, please.
That's 9 green ticks, Chair, so I think that's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Sue. Okay, in which case, and this may come as a relief to some of you, I suspect, what I'm going to do is do our 5-minute break now, if I may, and then we'll come, because we've cleared all the minutes business up, and then we've got other decision-making stuff coming forward. So we'll go to item 12 next, and if we can regather, please, at 19:32. And continue with the meeting then. Thank you. Is everybody back? Sue and Debbie, do we know? How are we doing?
You're muted, Sue. Yes, Chairman, we're ready to reconvene when you are.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie and Sue. Let's go now, please, to item 12, the Exeter and East Devon Enterprise Zone. And before I hand over to our officer, Andy Wood, to talk us through this, I'm just going to read out what the recommendations are so that it can be understood what this is about. So this concerns the Exeter and East Devon Enterprise Zone to the east of our district, and it's recommended that we as Cabinet note the progress made within the Enterprise Zone designation. Secondly, that we agree the principle of increasing borrowing up to 20 million against ring-fenced business rate income to fund the delivery of capital projects and make this recommendation to Council. Thirdly, that we agree the principle of a 1 million fund to enable the continuation of an enterprise zone business rate relief programme. And fourthly, that we receive further papers setting out detailed investment proposals. So I thought I'd say that for the benefit of any lingering members of the public who might otherwise not be certain what this is about. Very pleased to introduce, I think we're going to Andy Wood on this, unless we're going to Naomi.
It's Naomi, Chair.
It is Naomi. Okay, I did wonder earlier. And sorry about that, Naomi. I asked her and somebody said it would be Andy. So we're coming to you for the airport, aren't we, Andy? Right, in which case, very pleased to introduce Naomi Harnett, who's our Enterprise Zone Programme Manager.
Thank you, Chair. So as you've mentioned, this paper sets out an overview of the Enterprise Zone Programme, focusing on the financial position. The Enterprise Zone designation allows us to forward fund projects financed through borrowing from our ring-fenced business rate income. Due to a cautious approach taken with the original income estimates, we have continued to exceed the initial financial projections, with evidence that this position will continue. And we have tested the borrowing capacity and are in a robust position to increase the headroom within the programme, even if there is a significant reduction in income, and this is supported by our 151 officer. The report's being tabled now for many reasons. These include that we're reaching a critical time on certain projects, including the need to support the airports and the delivery of Cranbrook Town Centre. In response to COVID-19 and the current recession, supporting green recovery, as well as supporting clean and inclusive growth as set out in the local industrial strategy. All projects that will be funded by the programme will be brought back to Cabinet for detailed consideration following engagement with the Enterprise Zone Board, detailed project appraisals and with a detailed Cabinet paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Naomi. May I ask, please, if we have anybody from outside Cabinet who would like to ask a question of Naomi or speak at this stage by the means of blue hands? And I see none at the moment. Therefore, coming back into Cabinet, can I go to Councillor Paul Hayward, please?
Thank you, Chair. I should, in the interest of probity, in relation to item 1.4, which mentions the science park, just in the interest of probity, declare my interest as a director of the science park, if that could be noted. It's just a personal interest, not a pecuniary one. Thank you, Naomi, for the report. Members of Cabinet have seen it, you've read it, you've comprehended it. Yes, we're talking some big numbers. It's bigger than we thought before, but my apologies, there's some commotion going on outside. But we have some big challenges that we didn't perceive, we didn't even consider might be on the horizon, have now come to pass. So we need to protect and safeguard and bolster our East Devon economy, and especially in the enterprise zone. And this option and these recommendations are a sound way of doing it. As Naomi has said, it's not necessarily that we will spend that amount of money. It just gives us the capacity and the leeway and the chance to respond when we need to respond without having to come back and renegotiate these things. It will all be done in full public gaze, via Cabinet, via recommendations. Members of the public, members of the council will have the chance to contribute, to challenge, to scrutinise, and that's only right. But East Devon is at a crossroads now. We are at a point where we need to take demonstrative steps, brave steps, bold steps to move forwards. And I wholeheartedly applaud the recommendations that are here and look forward to working with councillors from cross-party to the betterment of East Devon and the enterprise zone area, which in essence will improve the lives of all East Devon residents collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can I come to Councillor Mike Allen next, please?
Thank you, Chair. I note in 1.6 on page 39 that there is a COVID-19 economy and business recovery prospectus. And I wondered, within the enterprise zone activity, and can Councillor Hayward tell me whether or not this is our plan, or is it accepted or rejected? Because it's been mentioned, and I know Andy Wood is doing a lot of work to further it, but we've never voted on it.
Okay, so Mike, just if you can clarify that for me. I've got 1.6 here, and you're talking about Devon County's prospectus, and we are already de facto in partnership with them. And your question is, have we in some way formally as a council adopted this joint working strategy with Team Devon, as it's called effectively?
Yes, effectively I'm asking if we've, I mean, there's a lot of elements to this recovery programme, amongst which are things for improving skills, and the Prime Minister was down in Exeter College promoting a skills programme and congratulating Exeter College on its superb work. I've recommended repeatedly that we get one of our officers who's actually skilled in this to be part of the opportunity to inform the skills agenda as part of an economic recovery plan, which is part of this agenda. But we've never said yay or nay, and I don't know whether or not we are in fact in tune with the Devon Economic Recovery Plan that we are represented on, or whether we're not.
Okay, thanks, Mike. As far as I understand, and I'll come back to somebody else in a minute. As you know, we're already working within the local enterprise partnership, within the partnerships with other districts, and then with the partnerships with Devon County as well. It may be that we need to, at a future meeting, come back at your suggestion and just have a look at precisely where we are. I'm not sure this debate on this issue now is the one to look at that, because we're looking, aren't we, at this specific capacity that we're looking to allow for the enterprise zone. But does anybody else want to comment on that? Paul, do you want to say anything about that? Haywood?
Thank you, Chair. I believe, Andy Wood is very desperate to speak, and I would suggest myself that I bring Andy in with his agreement, because really no one knows more about this than Andy.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say very quickly, I have discussed with Councillor Haywood bringing a paper to the October Cabinet, leading with the Team Devon prospectus. There is a paper going to Devon County Council's Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time, so that's very timely to follow on from there around supporting economic recovery. It would then pick up on our activity in relation to supporting business and also supporting people and skills, which Councillor Allen has raised as well.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Andy. Well, there we go. No, I didn't even know that. And look at, I almost got the question right. Thank you very much. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support the recommendations that are being made on this subject. I think it'd be very easy in the current climate to take a very cautious approach, but I think this is exactly the right time to show confidence that we are investing in the future, because it's a great opportunity to bring more skilled jobs into East Devon as well. And as I said, I think it's the rate of borrowing at the moment is at its lowest historically that it's ever been as well. So I think this is a really opportune time to be showing that confidence in the future of East Devon and what we're trying to achieve here.
Thanks, Jack, very much. Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think it is an important statement of intent, and I think it is, as Naomi flagged, crucial that this is an in principle. These are in principle support, subject to further reports coming forward. And in terms of the fact that we're borrowing it against ring-fenced business rate income, so that's money that's separate. It's not money that's being taken out of, fund. And my understanding is not money taken out of, funding for other things. It's specifically ring-fenced for the enterprise zone. Is that correct, Naomi?
Yes, that's correct. It's income which is from the enterprise zone, ring fence to support the enterprise zone.
Thanks, Naomi.
Thank
Is that
you.
okay, Jess? Thank you. Correct. No, absolutely needed to be asked. I suppose I'm just looking at the recommendations, and Naomi's made it very clear. They want to spend any of this money, it has to come back to Cabinet. Agreeing the principle. Do we need to strengthen the wording? No, I don't think we do. I think it's clear just through principle. Paul Haywood, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I thank Councillor Bailey for clarifying that this isn't money that is going to come from taxpayers directly via council tax and precept. It's not going to require the reduction or degradation of frontline services. It's ring-fence money deliberately put aside within the enterprise zone calculation, really. And if there is a better opportunity to use the phrase speculate to accumulate, I really don't know when we would use it, because that is exactly what we are doing. But we're not speculating, we are investing. We are investing in East Devon's future, using these ring-fence funds to accumulate benefit for years and decades, many decades to come. And as the report points out, the enterprise zone includes Cranbrook. And for all the residents who are watching, and the Cranbrook members who are here, and the members of East Devon across the whole area, across the whole district, from east to west, north to south, perhaps Cranbrook is the most pressing issue that we have to deal with. I know the Cranbrook ward members have been speaking to councillors. We've had multiple meetings about this. This is something that has been long overdue to be resolved, and these recommendations give us the tools to do just that. So I would urge Cabinet to vote in approval of this, give us the tools to do the job. There's a politician's phrase for you, and we will do it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hayward, can I ask, is that are you proposing that we accept the recommendations as they are?
I certainly am, Chair, with your agreement. Thank you.
Okay, coming back out to Councillor Marianne Rickson.
I would just like to second that, because I think this is a very timely and a very wise decision. So I would like to recommend that we support this.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Can we go to a vote on that, please? Green, tick for yes, red, no for no, obviously, red cross.
We have 9 green ticks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sue. Right, that concludes that agenda item. Blimey, we're only on item 13. Right, item 13, the COVID-19 recovery planning. We've got a very extensive report here, and we've got a series of recommendations. The recommendations are that we approve the service recovery planning process and support the work of council officers, providing leadership and support to the council's recovery work. Secondly, that we note that officers of East Devon District Council are leading the work on the service recovery action plan and will continue to provide support to progress the individual work streams. And thirdly, the Cabinet continues to support and participate in the engagement of Devon County Council's strategic recovery coordination work through officers' membership of its thematic subgroups. So before we have any full discussion on that, I just, if I may, put on the record again my absolutely boundless admiration and thanks for the work of our officers during this period of time, which has been really tough. And I've been in lots of these meetings. We've been privileged to be in them with other Devon leaders and with Devon County Council as well. And you can sense it's hovering, isn't it? It's confined to Exeter at the moment, mainly to the campus at the university. But I can assure you from meetings that I've had that that Devon is ready to react if it happens on a wider basis again. And I'd like to thank Mark Williams tonight, who made a very good report to the Team Devon operation earlier today that concerned this and was very helpful. Now, I'm looking for blue hands on this, and I have Councillor Paul Miller.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It may sound trite, but I also want to thank the strength and the resilience of the officers at the council during these unprecedented times. And I don't think there needs to be a debate on this item. I think we need to just move to a vote on the recommendations.
Okay, before we do that, and there's another speaker, Charlie Plowden is here, who's been kindly leading and coordinating on this. Charlie, is there anything, would you like to speak at this stage?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just very, very briefly, I just really wanted to reiterate that the purpose of the report is to provide Cabinet and Council with the reassurance that we have in place a very robust and resilient approach. And it's very sort of opposite really with what you've just said, with what's going on regarding effectively a second wave, a response approach that we're having to now consider. So for all of us, both officers and councillors across the divide, we're on a huge learning curve here. And, as you quite rightly say, I think, the last 6 months have shown that we have responded and reacted extremely well in very, very difficult, times. And, the evidence is there before you that we've recovered probably about 95% of our services. There's still some areas around, I mean, you'll be aware of, with our theatre and some of our public events where there's some ongoing uncertainties there. But we're confident that we can sort of fully recover, the vast majority of our services and continue to provide, all our communities, with, the level of service that, they've been used to in very, very trying circumstances. So the process we've been through, it's very process driven, it's very dry, as you quite rightly say, the sort of subject matter, but it's to provide you with that sort of reassurance that we follow best practice with the Devon Emergency Planning Partnership, and working with Team Devon's been absolutely critical to help us sort of guide our way through, not just our response, but our recovery work. And, Andy sort of touched on it just now, the economic and business recovery work that his team and Libby, with Revs and Ben's team, has been absolutely, crucial in ensuring that our local economies remain viable. Not saying there aren't challenges ahead, but I think we all agree, particularly within SMT, that we're in a good place at the moment. So those are just my very sort of brief words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thanks, Charlie. That's really helpful. Both the report and the content of what we've just said, and the brevity of it, which is much appreciated. Thank you. Now there's a hint. Councillor Mike Allen, please.
Yes, I get the point about brevity, Chairman. I keep
Thank you, Mike.
keep trying to be brief. I just want to echo the absolute appreciation with the revenue and benefits and housing and economic development teams, and the magnificent effort they put in, and it worked. And although benefits have applicants have actually tripled, we've got a long way to go yet, especially if a second wave really develops the way I anticipate it will. We're going to have more pressure on our team, and I hope that the environment team, the people who kept going all the way through to collect all of the refuse when they were exposed potentially to COVID infection, all of it has been fantastically done. All I would ask in recommendation number 3, when it looks at the thematic subgroups, please could we put somebody on the people thematic group to get representation on the skills agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Noted, Mike. I'm sure we can do that. I don't see any reason why not. A little note from today's meeting that might be worth mentioning, given Mike's talking about this coming back, is that there was a feeling amongst the Devon leaders and officers that when we react next, we try to avoid the term lockdown, because it's become very emotive, very loaded. And if, unfortunately, we do have to react, it won't be like the previous lockdown, as it was called. It's likely to be, very tightly focused on locales, even within Devon. So we'll need to evolve the way we're thinking about this as well. So Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Just very quickly, I wanted to completely endorse what Councillor Arnott said, having boundless admiration, and also Councillor Allen describing the effort as magnificent. And I think that, it is a very kind of fluid situation at the moment, and we're moving in kind of forwards and backwards, in and out of recovery and response. And, I'm very grateful for all our officers' efforts in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Well said. Councillor Tom Wright, please.
Thank you, Chair. I totally endorse what has been said, particularly with regard to our staff. Now, I have the pleasure of walking our lovely seafront every morning, every afternoon, and most evenings. And what has also been, to me, it's been a privilege to talk to our staff who are clearing up the seaside bins. When you look at that black and yellow poster on the papers, to see that in one day we collected almost 5 times as much rubbish as we normally do, although there might not be another lockdown as drastic as the one we've had, I have no doubt that those cruise ships which are parked in our bay at the moment will not be sailing next year. There'll be a reluctance to go on holidays. And I can see that we are going to have our beaches and seafronts absolutely inundated. And I've got to say, in Budley, with families who were respecting distance, and it was a nice atmosphere. But what I want to do, and it almost talks on from the mental illness and our staff that I've known over 14, 15 years, who have been very positive, keen, and really proud of the service they provide. For this time, this season, for the first time ever, I have seen them down, depressed, and very, very upset at the load we've expected them to do with regard to clearing the bins. And all I want is to ensure that when we forward plan next year, we actually, and I'm certain Jeff will pick this up, we certainly actually plan for a much greater need of our services next year, so that our staff aren't made to suffer the strain that they've had to suffer this year. They've done a great job. They're wonderful. We can criticise the people of leaving rubbish everywhere, but it's just the rubbish has to be picked up, and we've got to make sure our staff are given the added resources that enable to do that job without the exhaustion, depression, and feeling of dejection some of them have expressed to me. So what I want to say, congratulate the staff, but whatever happens, next year is going to be a very much busier year for our seaside resorts than it has been in previous years. And I want to make sure that we as an authority are geared up and ready to meet that challenge.
Thank you very much, Tom. Agreed there. Councillor Jack Rowland, please. Jack, are you there? Can't hear you at this stage.
You're muted, Jack.
Always forget to unmute. I'd like two things. I'd like to formally move the 3 recommendations that are contained in the report. And secondly, this isn't my idea. I picked it up from something else that has been mentioned. I'd like to start off a round of applause in appreciation of all of our staff and the officers that are here this evening. If we can just take a minute to do that, I think it will go down very well. Thank you very much for everything they've been doing.
Whoever's clapping the loudest is the one who's on the screen the whole time. Heaven knows what this looks like on YouTube, but thank you. And forgive us, staff, if it was only 10 seconds, but I know that none of you wanted a minute of that, but it's obviously heartfelt. Thank you very much. Councillor Jeff Young, please.
Firstly, I'd like to second Jack Rowland's recommendation, and also to say to Tom that we've recognised the hard work that all our staff have done. Now, they've done a fantastic effort this year. The amount of rubbish we've shifted in our street scene, as well as on the bins and everything, it's been a tremendous, fantastic job. How we've kept our heads above water, I don't know, but we have. And yes, next year is going to be quite a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So we had a proposer to accept those recommendations, which was Jack, and Marianne has seconded it. Can we go to a vote on that, please? Green ticks for yes, red crosses for no.
We have 9 green ticks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sue. So now we move on to item 14, towards zero carbon development in the West End of the district, and we have recommendations there. Can I ask Andy Wood to come forward and speak on that, please?
Chairman, can I interrupt you a second? I believe
Yes,
you've got a
Debbie,
public
please.
speaker.
Oh, of course. Thank you for reminding me, Mr. Henry Gent, wasn't it? Right, Mr. Gent, I hope you're ready to rock. Your 3-minute start whenever you start.
Thank you, Chair, and it's quite possible that Andy Wood will actually answer my question. I know he's been notified of in advance. Yes, burning plastic is burning fossil fuels at one remove, and it generates carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gas emissions on average, according to a report which I forwarded to you, quite high, 800 grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour. And I just think that before you accept the feasibility study, you need to be sure that you understand it, because the way I was reading it, the way we've been reading it, it shows how much carbon emission savings there would be by taking out the gas supply into the heat network and replacing it. But I'm not clear that it includes the carbon emissions that are created by burning plastic. Perhaps it does. Perhaps I just don't understand it. So although I've asked two questions, it's really one question, which is how much fossil fuels would be burnt at the energy waste plant, and what would be the carbon emissions of them. And before you commit East Devon to locking in to and the residents of the heat network and the future residents of the expansion of the heat network, before you commit to locking them in through planning to a heat network and locking the heat network to an incinerator, you need to be sure that you understand what you're doing, and perhaps Andy can explain. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gent. I'll come to Andy in just a second. You're probably relieved to have read the recommendations, which are that we're noting a feasibility study, that we're endorsing a principle, and that we're for further funding, and we're receiving a further report. So nothing's written in stone yet. But if I can come to Andy, please, to just briefly address Mr. Gent's concerns, and then maybe make a brief comment on the report itself.
Can I come in on that? I need to answer Henry's comments.
Do you want to take that on, Jeff? Go on,
Yep.
then. Thank you.
Good to see you, Henry. Long time no see. The answer to number one is WSP, the consultancy company that we used, did not use a figure for emissions from the process of waste incineration for their report. Referring to the Devon County Council approved planning application, which is 4150/2019, our Environment Officer submitted the following comments. There is an extensive gas cleaning system to be incorporated, which includes a scrubber, carbon and ammonia filter systems, and a final fabric filter. These systems are designed to use the best available techniques in order to satisfy the requirements of an Environment Agency A1 environment permit. The permit will provide the ongoing requirements for maintenance and monitoring of the emissions. I'm aware that the Exeter Energy from Waste plant had similar concerns, as the plant is very close to Exeter residents and the emissions has been found to be very low. I need to point out that this County Council application was originally approved in 2009, though substantial changes have been made to the design and the feed tonnage. The tonnage at full capacity will now be 82,000 tonnes, which is larger than the Exeter the Exeter plant, which is 60,000 tonnes. I'm also concerned regarding the CO2 emissions, and I'll endeavour to find out further information and get back to you, Henry, if that's okay. The answer to number two, the following is an extract from the relevant officer report. The energy generation process will utilise fibre fuel derived from commercial and industrial waste, and not curbside council collections. These are commonly known as refuse-derived fuel, RDF. This fuel is typically composed of plastics, composites, textiles, and small amounts of wood, paper, and cardboard. and is the residual material remaining after recyclable materials, metals and inert materials have been removed from the waste received at the transfer stations and material recycling facilities such as EMS facility at Hillbarton. EMS is already based at Hillbarton, but there's going to be a larger proportion of waste coming in from other commercial waste collection services throughout the area, but I haven't got any more details on that. I hope that answers your questions, Henry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Indeed, that's very helpful. And then if we can move now on to Andy Wood, who doesn't have to answer Mr. Jent's questions after all. So a brief report from Andy, please.
Thank you, Chair. So very briefly, this is a journey that started 10 years ago. District heating is a key foundation for the sustainability strategy for Cranbrook and Sky Park. We've 10 years later, we've reached a key juncture, particularly around the choice of technology to provide the energy to heat the hot water, essentially. Obviously, other things remain constant, not least the need to secure large-scale carbon savings. The report in front of you, or the background feasibility report, has looked at 14 different technologies and has modelled 3 in detail. 2 of those look at utilising waste heat, and I'll come back to that. 1 from the Energy from Waste plant and 1 from the converter station for the France Alderney Britain Connector project. It also looked at large-scale solar thermal. The other point that is emphasised within the report is that we obviously have a variety of roles that we can perform here. If we just stick with our regulatory role, that's unlikely to be sufficient. We need to be a bit more proactive. We need to find some additional grant, and there are government programmes to support the rollout of heat networks as well. So a further report will come back to you articulating the investment case in detail as well. The one point I just wanted to highlight in relation to the questions that were posed up front is around the counterfactual position. And by that, I mean, what would happen if we didn't utilise the heat from the waste heat from the Energy from Waste plant? Well, the plant would be built, it's permitted. The heat would go up the chimney and into the atmosphere, essentially. There is a body of work, and I'm not saying by any means that Energy from Waste plants are zero carbon, certainly not. But one of the greatest ways to improve their efficiency is to utilise both the heat and the power. And that is what the report has looked at, utilising that waste heat. And that is a planning requirement. And that's what that's, if you like, the leading candidate for how we can move forward. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. Excellent report, grateful for you, and an excellent digest there as well. Any blue hands? Marianne Rickson, please, our Climate Action Portfolio holder.
I'm just very concerned by the mention of burning plastics, because doesn't that produce noxious, polluting, dangerous to breathe in emissions? I mean, is this going to go, where's all this going to go? I'm just very concerned about burning plastic.
Andy, have you got an answer for that one?
Well, I think at the moment we need to be mindful that we send waste to the Marshbarton Energy from Waste plant. So that is part of the waste disposal strategy. This is a consented plant that would do essentially the same function, albeit with a different mix of material coming into it. So that is in essence what happens at the moment for those unrecyclable elements, and that is the strategy that was conceived post landfill. I can't give you a more technical answer than that, but clearly those plants have to perform to a very high standard through the Environment Agency permitting system.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Marianne, do you want to come back on that? Clearly, this is something you're going to want to monitor, isn't it, over the next period of time?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'll say no more.
Yeah. Okay. Jeff Young, please.
Yeah, coming back on Marianne's concerns, the filtering and systems within the stack at the plant filters out pretty well everything. The air, I'm told, that is coming out of the chimney is better than most high streets. And that is going to be checked by the Environment Agency. I did a lot of work on the energy from waste plant at Exeter, and I've been around the complex a couple of times, and they assure me that it's the best thing since sliced bread for dealing with the waste that we can't recycle. Going on to make my own comments is now I'm pleased that this is happening. And now the district heating system at Cranbrook is a great asset to us. Unfortunately, the plants are being powered by gas at the moment. I was therefore delighted to hear last year that we would be investigating how we can become carbon zero. I'm therefore disappointed to learn that we are going to rely on an energy from waste plant that's not built yet, although it's got permission, and the French Alderney-Britain interconnector, again, not built, and it's not going to be funded until 2022-23. And therefore, I wonder if we could add that we should allow for any possible new technology to come to be considered in the future. This then keeps the door open for any future technology. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I'm looking for somebody to move the recommendations. Just looking, I can see you on my screen, Jeff. I don't know if you're happy to do that, or we've got the 3 recommendations there.
I'm happy to do it if nobody else will.
Okay, that's Paul Miller, and anybody prepared?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Councillor
Chair.
Loudon. Okay, right. So we've got Paul Miller, Councillor John Loudon. Nobody else to speak. So can we go to green ticks for yes, please? Red crosses for no.
Okay, Chair, you've got 8 ticks for yes and 1 for no, so not quite unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Right, so moving on now to item 15, nature recovery networks and rewilding, or wilding projects as they might properly be known, some of them. So we've got an extensive list of 8 recommendations here, and we've got John Golding, the Strategic Lead for Housing, Health and Environment. John, this is a huge subject. It's 8:15, so love to hear from you, but if you can keep it reasonably economic, that would be much appreciated.
Chair?
Chairman,
yes.
We've got a public speaker, haven't we?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I've done it again. We've got Ed
Thank you,
Dolphin,
Jack's
haven't
doing
we?
my job. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Sorry.
No. Well, what a wonderful pair of assistants you are. Thank you. So, yes, so sorry, Mr. Dolphin. Ed Dolphin, are you tuned in and ready to go?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not surprised you've forgotten, because you're keeping so many balls juggled in the air at the moment.
That's very kind of you.
You're doing a marvellous job, I think.
Thank you.
I wish to comment on the report on nature recovery networks and rewilding projects. I think this is an excellent report which sets out a balanced view on an important subject. There is wide recognition that our natural environment is degrading rapidly, and there is a need for action. This is not only from experts such as Sir David Attenborough. Even our Conservative Prime Minister pledged protection for an extra 400,000 hectares of land this week. I'm not holding my breath. Some aspects of the proposed plan can be controversial, especially in urban settings. Grass cutting has been the theme for recent stories and letters in the Sidmouth Herald. The experimental regime needs refinement, but many objections are based on misconceptions. Now, this is recognised in the report, which recommends a campaign of public engagement and enlightenment. But I have to say, it doesn't help the case when councillors of long standing make claims in public statements that they should know are incorrect. I refer to Councillor Hughes being quoted in last week's Sidmouth Herald in a story about the poor state of a footpath in Arcot Park, Sidmouth, that resulted in pedestrians tripping and falling. He's quoted as saying, it's the so-called wilding policy of the district council that's causing the problems. When, as Devon Cabinet Member for Highways, he should know that the trip hazard on the path is down to poor maintenance and not any current EDDC policy, which has let wildflowers grow on the adjacent bank. I work with a number of environmental groups and organisations in the area, and our natural environment is in crisis. The decline of insect populations being one of the most significant problems confronting us. EDDC's nature recovery networks and rewilding projects can make an important contribution to biodiversity in East Devon, and I commend the report to your committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dolphin, and my apologies again for jumping straight over you. Thank you for
That's all right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, right. John Golding, please. May I come to you?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Thank you, Ed, for those comments. This report is entirely consistent with our climate change strategy that we adopted, one of the commitments in the action plan. And as you've seen from the report, it's also consistent with our green space plan. We're not new to this. We've trialled it in a number of areas, on our nature reserves, on some of our verges and parks and gardens. And what I'm suggesting here is that we kind of formalise this more, make it a mainstream environmental policy that we adopt as a council. The portfolio holders are very passionate about this. They've helped me shape the report. They've had significant input into the report and are really keen that we promote this in the way that the report's saying. I should emphasise that what we're not advocating is this approach in order to save money. What I'm saying in the report, hopefully it comes across quite clearly, is that rewilding does require some management regimes, perhaps different management regimes than we've used up until now. But it's not a money-saving exercise, as some have perhaps suggested, some critics have suggested. It's not just about letting areas grow wild. There's a lot of good practice across the district, and what I'm hoping is that we as a council can set an example and encourage town and parishes, perhaps landowners, farmers, gardeners, to follow the process. Chair, very conscious of time, so I'll perhaps stop there. The report is quite detailed, and I'm sure members have read it in detail. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you so much, John. It is an excellent report. There's always a chance that not all of us have always read all the reports before some of these meetings, but I would, because this is concerning the direction in the future, I would strongly recommend that that it be read afterwards if you haven't had a chance to so far. Thank you very much, John. Can I ask for, right, Councillor Andrew Moulding, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I am passionate also about our countryside in East Devon, and I would heartily agree with this report and recommendation. I'm the last house before you get to Musbury Castle, and during the lockdown I've had several opportunities to walk all the footpaths in and around Musbury and enjoy the fantastic scenery and the wildlife that we want to try and preserve. And talking about preservation, Leader, it is my 53rd wedding anniversary today. Oh. And if I don't leave your meeting now and join my wife, I won't make it to the 54th. Thank you very much.
Well, then you're excused, and I'm sure
Thank you very much.
Just in case we will have a sort of wicker arrangement for you if it all goes badly wrong. Now I'm getting a phone call which will be ignored, and presumably somebody realises with this live, and they've got it. Thank you.
It's not your
Thank
wife,
you, Andrew. Yeah, no, right, thank you. So Councillor Denise Bickley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to follow that now. I'd just like to say that I'm delighted with the tone of this report, and thank you, John. It's brilliant. It's really forward-thinking, so focused, draws together so many sources of information and makes it all cohesive and easy to follow. From a personal point of view, I'm at Sidmouth Town Council and I'm the chair of the Environment Committee there, and we have a new group called the Sid Valley Biodiversity Group, and we can completely see how this can help us, and we can sit completely within the framework. So working from a national policy down through Devon County's policy to ours, right down town and parish, volunteers, it's all feeding back, helping each other, and I think it's really, really important and really well written. So providing data to improve the picture locally and globally is going to be so important. And so for relatively little spend, and possibly, as John mentioned, it could save us money, but that's not the point. But just by managing the land, always with the environment at the fore, we will see improvements in wildlife biodiversity and our own physical and mental well-being, as we touched on earlier. We need to be really transparent, though, about why we are doing it, what we're doing, and we need to counter any misconceptions, as Ed touched on, all the negative publicity, and keep at the forefront why we are doing this, and that looking after the environment no longer means just keeping the grass cut short to keep it tidy. That approach has resulted in 80% of species loss in our insects. So we just need to keep this at the forefront, keep explaining to people what we're doing, and be really proud that we're really setting a very great initiative in policy here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Denise, very much. Councillor Jack Rowland, please, and then Councillor Jeff Young. And again, if I could just ask you to keep it under a minute each, Jack and Jeff, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's a shame Councillor Moulding's left, because I would like to offer my congratulations on his wedding anniversary.
Oh, yes.
Might have been the first I've actually offered him congratulations on something.
No, you spoiled it now.
But just getting back to the report, congratulations to John for an excellent report. I'm just wondering if we could add a further recommendation in there under 9 to add in that we consider additional tree planting in appropriate areas where the trees are appropriate to the relevant location and soil. I don't know if that's relevant in this particular report, but having read the report, I couldn't see any mention of any additional tree planting.
John, what view would you take on that? Does it fit in with this particular string of recommendations?
It can fit in with those recommendations, but equally I'd be very happy to bring a further report, because there's some work that we're doing with our tree officers on tree planting, additional tree planting. It's something that again is in our climate change strategy. So I'm relaxed. We could either include it as an extra recommendation if Cabinet wish, or we can bring some more detailed reports forward on tree planting. It's a kind of subject in its own right, really. And I'm sure our public speaker would have some input into that as well.
Yeah, Jack, I'm minded to think, can we hold that back and do as John is suggesting? Because if something's coming forward on trees, that may be worth something on its own right, rather than getting it lost as a number 9. Is that okay with you, Jack?
Well, it's good to hear that John's mentioned it's going to be included in a future report. So I look forward to seeing that. So I'm quite happy hearing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack, very much. Councillor Jeff Young, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a short speech from the Secretary of the Woodbury Wide Awake group that was mentioned in the report as a good example. If you don't mind, could I read it out?
How short is it?
1 page and a little bit.
That's too long, Jeff. Sorry.
Right, I will cut it down then.
Well, cut it down to 2 lines. If you, I mean, what's it basically saying? Is it in support? Is it?
It supports it in a very big way, but the key issue in this was that. Let me find the bit.
Jeff, what
in 2000, I found it now. In 2008 and 2011, a wildflower study was completed, and this was then replicated last year, and the survey resulted with a loss of wildflower species and biodiversity in the parish of 29%, which is above national average. So that demonstrates in what direction we're going in this area, and this report and what we're hoping to do hopefully will reverse that very tragic disappearance of all these wildflowers.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. On another night, it would have been good to hear the whole thing. And if you wanted to send that round to all councillors, I'm sure they'd be interested to see it. Thank you. Marianne, please. Marianne Rickson.
Okay, I'd just like to catch up on a few recent events. For example, today, the Royal Botanic Garden of Kew's annual report was issued on the world's flora and fungi. In only 4 years, the rate of decline has doubled. The report states that 39% of plants are now at risk of extinction, which is up from 21% in 2016. So this subject is not only topical, but it would appear there is no time to lose. Habitats have been fragmented, which has severely depleted wildlife and their ability to move freely. If you remember the old days when you would have had to clean the dead flies from your windscreen, well, there are almost no splats at all these days. There's been a gradual decline too in butterflies, bees and other pollinators. And these are all indicators of the decline for which we, as a species, are responsible. Yet the humble insect plays an important part in the food chain. Insects are the sole food source for many amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. According to the Mammal Society England Red List, 1 in 4 species is threatened with extinction. Small wonder this has happened when you realise that 97% of wildflower meadows have been lost since World War II. And if we're not careful, we could end up in the same position as the Chinese. In rural China, humans now pollinate flowers by hand. They're doing the work that bees once did for free. Workers now pollinate fruit trees artificially, carefully transferring pollen from male to female flowers to fertilize them. Now, nature has an amazing ability to recover. We just need to give it a chance.
Thank you, Marianne, very much for that. Councillor Maddie Chapman, please.
Thank you, Leader. I suspect that Councillor Miller will jump up. He knows what I'm going to say. We've come across a problem in Exmouth. Planning, as you probably know, the planning officers always ask developers to leave certain areas wild. The point is no one is taking charge of these areas. And recently we had a resident cut down 10 trees and it was in Paul Miller's ward. Unfortunately, there's a bat colony down there. And one of the residents that lives with me is into her bats, and she was absolutely horrified. I've had this chat with Miller. We've had this chat with Street Scene and the tree officer and Devon Highways, but no one is taking responsibilities for all these small bits of no man's land that are around the district that have been called for by planning, that have been left there with trees for the wildlife. And if someone goes and cuts the tree down, if it hasn't got TPO, we're not doing anything about it, but it is a habitat. So I have said to Councillor Miller to bring it up. I don't know if he has spoken to anyone yet, but I think it's a great shame when you've taken down sort of 10 trees, destroyed a bank just because the leaves drop on their garden. You know, I'm sorry. I think we have to do something about this no man's land. I don't know if John's got any ideas about it. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. I'll take it as read that John has noted that, Maddie, and Councillor Miller as well. I think number 2 on the recommendation is that we work through the green spaces identified in our green space plan. It may be that a green space plan needs to actually cast its net a bit wider and look at things that are already rewilded, so to speak, that aren't actually managed. It's rewilding is something a passion of my own. You can't do it without managing it. Is the truth. Councillor Tom Wright, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to bring some good news. I totally support the report and its aims, and I know that East Devon actually can be very proud of its record in many ways with regard to what we do for our environment. And I noticed that people are talking, there's an item about the axe regeneration. What I want to bring to the Cabinet's attention, and Jeff Young is familiar with this, and I chair the stakeholders group, the plan to return the Lower Otter back to what it was before the Napoleonic Wars and the Napoleonic prisoners of war built the banks which contain the river. It's coming before our planning committee to actually revert the Lower Otter to what it was 200 years ago, which will result in 55 additional hectares of salt marsh and other really important nature, wildlife and botanical gains. And the reason behind it is we're putting in flood alleviation works up the Exe, and we have to find alternative habitat for those wildfowl, those water birds that will be forced away. And 22 million funding has been provided from Europe to do this. So I'd just like John to make a note of that. I know James Chubb has been to some of the meetings, but I'd certainly like our wildlife team to pay particular attention to that project as it comes forward to planning later this month. But that is good news. We're returning to nature as it was 200 years ago, which would be a benefit for everybody. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I formally move the 8 recommendations that are in the report?
Yes. Councillor John Loudon, please.
Chair, I'm happy to forgo my comments and second Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, John. No more speakers, so can we go to green ticks for yes to adopt those recommendations, please? A red cross for no.
Chair, you've got 9 votes for yes. So
Okay.
it's unanimous.
Lovely, thank you very much, councillors and also all members, cabinet. I'm going to do something slightly unusual. You may have noticed I had a phone call about 5 minutes ago. It is from the BBC want to know which way we're going on Exeter Airport. So with your indulgence and giving Andy Wood moments to compose himself, I'm going to try and bring item 19 up now, if that's okay. Item 19, Exeter Airport. Andy, does that work for you if we do that now?
Perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Right. A short introduction.
Sorry, I'm just having to open the agenda item myself. Yes, please, after you.
Okay, so very briefly, Chair, I think the airport has been our most impacted business in the district in terms of the COVID pandemic, particularly the double whammy effect of Flybe going into administration in early March, followed shortly thereafter by the lockdown. The figures in the report speak for themselves. I won't go through that. The purpose of the report is to put forward a package of support to help support the airport through a really difficult time. Some of those measures are short-term, so particularly business rate relief up to the de minimis state aid limit, but also further investment into the Long Lane project, which has taken some time to get to its current point where it's now pretty much ready to start, subject to what was set out in the report around finding some additional investment into the drainage scheme. More strategically, the report also highlights a pathway towards potentially a Freeport designation, subject to confirmation of what that of government's intentions in that respect in the bidding programme. and also towards addressing perhaps one of the really key issues with aviation, decarbonisation, and how the airport can be a focus or a centre for a sustainable aviation cluster going forward. Important to emphasise that that package of support is not a cure-all. It will not address the issues that in totality that the airport is facing, but hopefully it's more than a gesture as well in terms of helping the airport through that period. So the recommendations are to recognise the impact, the financial impact of the pandemic, to support rate relief, and also I'm just getting the report in front of me, in terms of the financial aspects, to support the increased budget for the Long Lane project. The other aspects relate to the more strategic items, including, as I say, the Freeport and the sustainable aviation cluster. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Sorry to dump that on you at such short notice, and thank you for your brevity for what's a very complex issue and report. Councillor Sam Hawkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak quickly so we can reach the BBC. Obviously, it's a very nuanced matter here regarding mainly the rates relief aspect. Both economy and climate change, I think, are important here. There's a whole different rabbit hole around the ownership of the airport, which isn't for today's debate. It's been mentioned that there's state aid limitations in the support that we're available here, but I think it's important to remember there's also an opportunity cost on granting funds effectively to the airport if taken under a rates relief scheme. But what I can't see here is about protecting the interests of the council. Looking at this as sort of the airport being a creditor of the council, whether we've considered maybe reshaping this as a sort of secured loan. I don't know if that's an option, but obviously that would enable the airport in better times to repay, even if it was given at preferable rates. Maybe that's another state aid implication, but I imagine it's lower than a complete write-off would be, and therefore might be more feasible. The other option is even taking that one step further and maybe doing a debt for equity swap, if that's something that's within the remit, and then would give us power to say to such a large organisation within our district, let us actually have a say in what happens going forward. Again, we can then share with them the risk and reward. And it could even give us scope to share some of the risks with Exeter City Council and Devon County Council, who are both major beneficiaries of what the airport brings as well, rather than letting it just fall on the district. I just think that's something that Cabinet could consider.
Thanks, Sam, very much. All those points are very well made, and we've been talking them round and round for about the last 3 months. You make a particular point, 2 particular points there. One of them relates to the climate action agenda as well. It's ironic, isn't it? We've just voted to rewild the entire district, and now we're encouraging aviation. So there are real balances to be struck there. And Andy, can you come back on with a sort of technical financial answer to whether there is the possibility of us asking for the money back in good times? What did we come up with that in the end?
Yes, so the answer to that is yes. So we are seeking, and the figures are set out in the report. I was just trying to find the relevant paragraph, but it's I think 3.8. We would look to enter into a facility agreement with the airport to recoup £580,000. I think the point that was raised by Councillor Hawkins was around the security for that. We have explored 3 specific ways of doing that: a bond, a charge over the land, and a parent company guarantee. And the airport are prepared to offer a parent company guarantee. So that would securitise those funds coming back. And we're talking through the trigger points as to the timings when that would happen as well.
Okay, thank you. Sam, is that okay? Does that answer that particular
concern?
I think
that covers it appropriately. I think I've not picked up the nuance of that point, but yeah, that certainly, I think, addresses that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Paul Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hawkins has pretty much taken the words out of my mouth. This has been one of my themes that I've been discussing with Andy about exactly that. You know, we share in the benefits of the good times, we share in the risks of the bad times. and I wouldn't be happy going forward on this unless there was some security tied in. And I'm delighted that the airport owners have recognised that we are, we're putting, our taxpayers' money on the line. We're putting East Devon money on the line, so it's only right that they offer some guarantee, some security. I suppose going forward, and I was heartened as well, and you'll recall, Chair, that I shared with you a tweet by our Simon Jupp MP that he is pressing for the temporary scrapping of business rates for the airport, which he says has cross-party support across the Southwest. And that's great. And yourself and other members and Mark Williams and Simon will be aware that I'm very keen to invite Simon and Neil and Mel Stride and Ben Bradshaw to meet with us once we sort of scope out exactly what we're going to ask them to do, to show their support collectively that that's what they're going to be pressing Mr. Sunak to do. Let's press for that, because that will have implications on this. So I suppose in terms of the recommendations, recommendation 2, let's have a look. Recommendation 2, so supports the proposed. So we do support the proposed business rate relief request within state aid limits to be funded through the Enterprise Zone Programme, subject to, sorry, I've caught you on the hop, subject to further negotiations with our regional MPs on the wider issue of business rates for airports. Because if we can press our MPs to stand by their tweets and lobby successfully central government for this business rate relief, it won't be necessary for us to do this, because those rate reliefs won't be necessary because they'd have been sorted out nationally. And whilst the recommendation will show our support for it, the caveat is if national government comes good, then we won't have to. That would be my recommendation, because then we are working in unison with our MPs, Labour MPs, Conservative MPs across the region, to demonstrate that they believe in our airport and its future and the viability and the economic benefit it brings to East Devon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Can you, by the means of modern technology, just email through or WhatsApp through your proposed after comma wording to Democratic Services so that they can consider that while we continue with the debate? Thank you. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thank you. Having just heard what Councillor Haywood said, I fully endorse that, and I'd actually like to second that. The other point I wanted to make was this is quite a conundrum really on this subject, because there's so many conflicting issues surrounding this. But one of the things I was quietly encouraged by was the news earlier this week that the first passenger plane actually powered by hydrogen actually flew just a few days ago. It might have only been a 6-seater, but and a short flight, but a company that's behind this called Zero Avia. I heard him being interviewed, the chief executive of this company being interviewed on Radio 4, I think the day afterwards, the successful flight. And the rate of progress on this particular subject really does encourage me about what could be happening in the not too distant future now regarding much larger passenger planes being powered this way, as he was very confident that that could happen. So I think that's definitely a way forward for what could happen with Exeter Airport, and hopefully being in the vanguard of that. So I'll probably change my views somewhat on this particular subject fairly recently. And as I said, I'd like to second what Councillor Haywood said and actually endorse the other recommendations that are in the report.
Okay, thank you, Jack, very much. I know it's been mentioned, and I let all members know, but we heard yesterday that the Dublin-based company who are going to set up these 100 new jobs in for maintaining current aircraft stock. And meanwhile, in another part of the jungle, we've got Exeter University, Exeter College, and the local enterprise partnership who are doing exactly the type of work you're talking about, Jack. They are looking at green flight, and as you say, in a sense, whatever that is, it seems impossible, and yet maybe it's coming. Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you. It's a question for Andy really about the other airports in the other areas, and whether there's any update in relation to rate relief being granted from the other local authorities.
Yeah, thank you. So we have contacted Norwich and Bournemouth and received confirmation there will be no issuing of rate relief there. I'm suffering from reverse Coventry syndrome because I haven't managed to track down a contact at Coventry City Council. But the key point I'd just like to emphasise is if you take what's happened with Scotland, there's a very different scenario within the UK evolving here, which is the Scottish Government acted very quickly in March to give all of their airports 1 year rate relief. And that was done, as I say, very quickly when the extent of the pandemic became clear. That also extended into allied industries, including things like baggage handling, for example, and also for Loganair, given that they're the principal airline in Scotland. I think what's missing here, and it's picked up, I think, by Councillor Haywood, is it would be much better. I think also the airport's preference would be to have a coordinated national package of support, which would be over and above what we can do within state aid limits as well. And if that could come forward, that would be ideal. The reason why the report has come to you in the way it has is because currently there is no confirmation that that will be forthcoming from the UK government, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Andy, very much. Councillor John Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was very interested to hear the amendment put forward by Councillor Haywood. And as you know, I'd always support us doing any work in unison. But moving forward, I think that this whole report absolutely demonstrates the confidence that we have in the airport and everything that goes on in and around it. It shows our leadership at a time where the airport is suffering from a double whammy, the double whammy of the Flybe collapse and then the COVID coming along and all that's brought. So at this point, I would move the recommendations as amended, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor Marianne Rickson.
This was just a comment on something that Andy has just said. He was commenting about the Scottish Government giving rate relief as from March. I would just like to point out that they do have the Barnett formula, so they are much more heavily funded as a part of the UK than the southwest of England. We get one of the lowest per capita sums, I believe. So I think, we're not comparing like with like here. They get more money from the government anyway.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay, so we've got a proposal from Councillor Haywood, which slightly amends the second recommendation. We have a seconder for that from Jack Rowland. Democratic Services, have you got the wording from Councillor Haywood that adds to that second recommendation?
Yes, I have.
Could you
Chair,
just
can I just ask?
Yes, Henry, please.
So sorry, I've just been having or trying to be clear with Andy and Simon, the timing issue here of the effects of what Councillor Haywood is suggesting, in that it just strikes me we're slightly in a hiatus there as to whether we're granting it or whether the government's granting it. And is there a drop dead date beyond which we have to grant it because the national government haven't put in place any national rate relief for airports? I can't quite work out exactly where the priority sits.
Well, that had occurred to me as well. I wonder whether we need to alter the wording very slightly, because obviously Exeter Airport need to hear from us that we're minded to do this with the business rate relief, whereas what Councillor Haywood's amendment is suggesting is that we need to have a meeting with the MPs first, isn't it? I think, in effect.
Yeah, that's how I took it. To my mind, it would, and I think this is probably what is meant, is that it is confirmation that business rate relief will be given unless by a certain date the government have put in place a national rate relief for airports.
Can I go back to so Paul Haywood? What can I just what is your intention behind that? Are we trying to withdraw consent to this until the MPs gather in a room, or?
Well, I mean, I'm very, very supportive of what Simon Jupp MP has put forward, because it's very sound. It shows his belief and his trust that we can do the right thing and that his government can do the right thing. I'll be guided by Andy on this. I mean, if we delayed this, if I put a 30-day limit in it, obviously, that the government perhaps doesn't move that fast. We know it can move that fast. It can issue all sorts of things on the spot, it seems. And it may well wish to follow the lead of the Scottish Government. But I mean, perhaps if I could ask through you, Chair, for Andy's guidance on this. I mean, if I added, 30 days, the end of October, and if by the end of October, I mean, my worry there is that I believe it should be a national issue. This isn't just about Exeter Airport, it's about every regional airport, and the government putting its money where its mouth is and protecting this vital economic activity. And Simon is supportive of it. I haven't heard from Neil, I haven't heard from Ben, I haven't heard from Mr. Stride. But you'll see the speed that I contacted our CEO and asked for that meeting to be organised. And I know that we have a meeting between us that's been scheduled. But I would like to see some proactivity from all the parties to lobby the Chancellor and say, you need to do it. Now, of course, if we put a deadline on it, that's a bit of a cop-out for the government, because they say, oh, yes, we're going to consider it. But if we say the 30th of October, we'll start consider it on the 1st of November. And I appreciate it. I don't want to deter what we're doing, because in the wider scheme here, the package of measures that we're proposing allows for that to be done. It really does. And of course, it is funded through the Enterprise Zone programme. So this again is not direct taxpayer funding. It's a wider negotiation of ring-fence money. So frontline services will not be affected if we do it. But I just feel sometimes that on this, that we need to, and I don't want to use the word call the bluff of, because it's not a bluff. It's a genuine desire to do the right thing for the aviation industry, and particularly Exeter Airport and all of the jobs that are there. But Mr. Jupp started this. He showed his support, and I wholeheartedly applaud it. I retweeted that tweet because I know he means it. And we mean business. We really do. But so I'd be guided by Andy, and I'd be guided by you, Chair, as to whether we do put a deadline date on it. Because if you put a deadline date on it, the other party can just ignore it.
Okay, we've got hopefully a helpful blue hand from Simon Davey, I see there. Simon.
I don't know if it helps, Chair, but basically, if you were to approve discretionary rate relief and then the government came in with a national scheme, that would overwrite it in terms of that money would be reversed back out again, and our contribution would fall by the wayside, as it's a discretionary scheme. So if you did agree to it and then a national scheme came in place, fine, accounting wise, if you like, your contribution can come back to the council. I suppose the other point to mention is their rates bill is in the order of 600,000. Our contribution can only help up to 180. So that's really what they're pushing for and what we would be pushing for to help them.
And that's over 3 years, Simon, isn't it, as well?
That's correct, yes.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may come in on that, with that reassurance from our finance officer, I would be happy then to withdraw my amendment, knowing that there is support for it from our MPs, but knowing that in doing the recommendation 2, if national government comes good and does support regional airports via that means, that our financial package will be reversed. So on that basis, I'm happy to withdraw that amendment and just move on as put here, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. But I think you made a very valuable point for the record there, and that will have been well noted. Councillor Peter Faithful, please.
Just slightly off track a bit, but this improvement of Long Lane, what measures are going to be put in place to make sure that heavy goods vehicles that don't go beyond the improvement, because the lanes beyond there are pretty narrow and not suitable for heavy goods vehicles, like Silver Lane and through Aylesbury and Marsh Green?
Okay, thank you. That's probably that's a good question. It's a bit highwaysy, but Andy, have you got any advice on that?
I'll happily pick it up with County Council colleagues, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. That's a point well made. We do need to watch out for that, don't we? What happens at the end of the lane? Okay, thank you very much. So we've got a proposal and a seconder to agree these recommendations. I don't think we have any more speakers. Can we go to green ticks for yes, red crosses for no, please?
Okay, you have 8 green ticks at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
9, that's just gone up to 9.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Sue. That's carried then. Very good indeed. Now, can I take some advice from all of you in Democratic Services at the moment? We're getting towards the 3rd hour. Now, I happen to know that we might have to have an emergency meeting of Cabinet next week because in the context of COVID, there's this issue many of you will know about these emergency payments of £500. And we understand that this is going to be something that the district is going to have to administer, and we need to put some detail in that, and that will have to go through Cabinet. Henry, I'm thinking whether it might be best to, if we have that meeting, and that's obviously one agenda item meeting, if it were to happen, whether we take items 25, 22, 21, 20, and do them at that meeting. What do you think, rather than plough on too far now, because we do have to receive these financial reports?
Yes, I don't think it's a big issue. The only difficulty will be I'm not entirely sure at what point the report will be ready to call the urgent meeting. But yes, you can add all of the reports that you don't want to consider tonight to that, because I mean, to all intents and purposes, they have already been published as well. So I don't think there's an issue with that, if that's how you would like to play it.
And it's likely to be, as we understand it, we're likely to have to do this meeting next week, aren't we? As it stands.
Yeah, it is, because the deadline, the national deadline for having it sorted. I'm just not sure whether it's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's rather dependent on Libby's report being ready, so that we can then call the meeting and publish the report at the same time.
Okay, so Cabinet, if we look at item 20 for member champions, 21 complaints to Ombudsman, 22 the protocol on planning, and 25 the Ocean Blue reports, are you all happy if we put those back until next week so that we don't go on into the night tonight? Is that okay for all of you? Or shout if it isn't. Oh, Megan's put a blue hand up. Thank you. Is that a yes, Megan?
Can I speak?
Yes, please do, Megan. Go on.
Yeah. No, I just want to. So, what are we doing about the finance reports then?
No, we'll do those. I'm just trying.
We'll do those now.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is to basically, they're officers who would hang around for another hour or so if we don't make a decision to defer those items.
Right.
But we definitely have to deal with the financial report. Sorry about this. This is my ludicrous answer phone going off.
Oh, do you want me to take over briefly?
Yes, thank you.
We're all tuning in, aren't we?
Modern technology. Modern technology.
Councillor Hayward. Councillor Hayward.
Councillor Loudon.
Sorry to interject, but I was hoping to get I was hoping to do this with Councillor Arnott whilst we were still on the item of the airport, and I don't know whether it's right and proper and appropriate, and you'll tell me if it's not. But given, I suspect across all groups on the council, we see the decisions that we've made to be very important, and particularly trying to get meeting with the MPs off the ground. Is it something we could ask our colleagues from a particular group on this council to use their best endeavours to lobby those MPs who are in their party?
Thank you, Councillor.
If it's not appropriate.
Thank you. Well, it's nothing that I or indeed Councillor Arnott or indeed any of us can force, but I'm sure the members from the party represented by those MPs, and we, to my knowledge, we don't have any Labour members on this council, but certainly I would hope that the Conservative members of this council take on board what the Cabinet decision is about, show our faith in the airport, and that they could lobby as demonstrably as they can their elected representatives. And Councillor Rylance has raised a very valid point. Those MPs represent us all, not just their party members and the member and councillors who share their party colours. But I do take your point. If those councillors who are from that group wish to lobby, I would applaud that, and I'm sure all the councillors here would welcome anything they can do to drive home the fact that this council really would appreciate their support and their involvement and their interaction and cooperation with this council, so that if we invite them to meet with us at the earliest opportunity to discuss this and a wide variety of other economic and probably social issues, that they make every effort to attend. They're not attending at the House of Commons an awful lot. We have Zoom, we have social distancing. So yes, I think it's entirely appropriate for you to say that. And I hope the members from the Conservative group take that in the spirit it's intended, nothing more, that if they can make the best representations, I'd personally be grateful. I'm sure all councillors who are not in the Conservative group would also appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, very much indeed. I'm back. Sorry about that. That was, technology. So yes. So where we got to, and with thanks again for your forbearance. Again, I wouldn't normally do this, but the Exeter Airport thing, there is interest in it, and so we would need to deal with that. So thank you for that. So can I confirm that anybody who was staying for Ocean Blue, members advisory panels, complaints to the Ombudsman or member champions, if you're particularly staying for that, then those won't come up this evening, but will come up next week. And thank you for your understanding on that. So the last three items on the agenda. Yes, Jack, please.
Sorry to interrupt. I did have my blue hand up before you just started speaking.
Sorry, Jack. Go on, didn't see it.
I was going to make a suggestion, and I don't know how people feel about this, but can I also suggest that if there is going to be a cabinet meeting called for next week, that in view of the contents and importance of agenda items 16, 17 and 18, that they are also moved to next week, because we've now spent the best part of 3 hours in this session already.
Agreed. And this is crucial, what we're talking about at 16,
yeah,
17,
and I don't think,
18.
to be fair to all members, I don't think it's fair to try and rush through those last 3 items on finance.
Okay.
So if members are in agreement, I would like to propose we move that to on the agenda for next week as well.
Okay, I've got Councillor Miller and Councillor Hayward. Have you got?
Yeah, I'd second that, and just to added thought that in the future it might be wise for us to look at having cabinet meetings held more regularly, because we do need that debate in these meetings. We can't be rushing through these agenda items. And it's so hard to be concentrating for this amount of time expected to vote on various items. So I think it'd be good for us all if we could consider more frequent cabinet meetings.
Okay, good, thank you. Paul Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Just to support what the previous two speakers have said, and also that within items 16, 17 and 18, as members of Cabinet know, there are additional items that we need to consider. And I wouldn't call it fortuitous, but actually a slight delay to the next Cabinet meeting to consider those, bearing in mind other things that are happening almost on a daily basis because of the nature of what we're all experiencing. I think that would be appropriate and pertinent and would actually lead to better decision making. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I come to Simon Davey then, please? Simon, sorry for having you hang on. Is that agreeable to you to do this at our next Cabinet meeting next week then?
Yeah, certainly, because I was going to actually share the agenda papers on the screen and go through in a bit of detail, so I think you probably appreciate that.
Oh, you can imagine the sort of people disappearing, can't you? Now you'll have a fresh audience next week then. Okay, in which case, thank you. Sorry for this slightly unorthodox structure to the meeting, but I think it is for the best. I'm going to fast forward to the end now, where it's a form of words I have to use, which I will get to in a minute. I certainly know I have to thank you all for attending this evening, for your contribution, and for all members of the public who have been watching in as well. Can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. Until then, your comments will be live to the public. But other than that, good night. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, fellow Cabinet members, councillors and staff. Thank you.
Member, can I just
You're muted, Henry.
Oh, I was just saying that there were two public speakers who were in the meeting, so even when we were not live anymore, they will still be there. So just to bear that in mind.
Thank you. Well, Paul, you were spared my 15-minute report on speech on member champions.